Okay, well, let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful, Lord, for the Sabbath hours that are coming, at least for us, and some that are already experiencing the blessing of the Sabbath. We just invite your presence to work upon our hearts, that you can teach us and direct us and correct us. We ask, Lord, that as we continue to look at the studies of Colin's, that you can bless us, help us to understand the things that he has presented, to see the truth, and to see the way that you are working in this movement at the present time and in this earth, and help us to watch and to wait, to measure the time, and to understand what it is, what our present duty is. Be with each person. May your angels watch over them. We pray for those that are suffering health issues. We ask, Lord, that you can help us to follow your laws of health and that we can take care of ourselves. But we know we live in a world of sin, and we ask, Lord, that you can protect us from the things that we have no control over. Bless us now in these studies, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good evening, everyone, and happy Sabbath to those who are experiencing the Sabbath. And of course, we will be here in about an hour and 15 minutes. Now, the study here is a number of things that we have to address. So last week, I had drawn out this chart, and I've added a couple things to it since then. And this basically is taking Colin's study and putting it into literal time. That is, we're going to take the prophetic mirror. So in Colin's study, he had used the prophetic mirror. And I'm just going to actually bring up his diagram here. I don't know which one it is. I should have changed the title. I have a lot of things on my computer. Okay, so a lot of things have happened. So it would be this screenshot here. Yeah, so I've downloaded a lot of things over the last few days. I probably should put this in a different file than just in my downloads. So when we looked at Colin's study here, and I know he has an updated version of this, which I probably could have copied. He added a couple of things in here on Saturday night in his study. And what we see here is the prophetic mirror and the 65 years. And we can see that these are going to be marked in the US election, dealing with when Joe Biden is elected to the January 6th siege of Washington. And he's going to mark this as raffia, time of the end. And then he's looking at the midterm elections as being Paneum. So he doesn't have here the dates that we ended up marking. We marked all these different dates. And my understanding is he was using this symbolically. So this 46 and 19, he wasn't taking as days, but he did calculate those days. He just wasn't using them. And so I understand that he's not saying it's going to be 65 days from November 8th that the Battle of Paneum is then. We have a match for, so he's not going to say that January 11th 2023 is going to match January 6, 2021. So that he's not made that claim at all. And so he's going to deal with also some of the symbols here, the King of the South, the United States, and the world. Um, so I'm not sure exactly what, because I didn't see this study, so I'm not sure exactly what he meant by this. Okay. Yeah. So, but this is the chart that he had done basically 2 weeks ago, and then he addressed it again Saturday night at the Saturday night study, and he asked that to be recorded, and I watched the recording about halfway through of his study, so I haven't watched the whole thing yet. But then I did talk to Colin, so I talked to him on Sunday, and we went over some of these things. So we're going to talk about some of this. So we discussed some of what he was presenting, and so we're going to address those points. So I'm going to go back to my diagram. So in my diagram, I do have the time there, but I'm not claiming that Colin is time setting at all. Never made that claim, and I wasn't even thinking that that's what he was doing. So that was something that was misunderstood when I actually put these dates here. So I thought I had made it clear that I'm marking these dates, that Colin isn't, but that we have witnesses that these dates, in spite of the fact that Colin's not marking them, that they are witnesses. Now, when we look at dates in the future, is that time setting?
I would say so.
Okay, well, we've taken the position that we can put dates in the future. So, for instance, December 25th, 2021, we never had any event. We had a symbolic representation of the Sunday law on December 25th, 2021. That's what we always had said. We didn't expect any particular event. We talked about the possibility of what kind of event could be there, but we didn't have anything specific that could tell us that on that date something's going to happen. And we did with July 18th, and we did with November 9th, but we didn't do that with March 27th, 2021, and we didn't do that with December 25th, 2021. Now, if you remember, so Bonnie, you said that is time setting. Can you explain why that would be time setting in your definition?
I think there's a difference between looking at an event that is already scheduled by, a government or whatever, and a difference between that and looking at numbers. Like, for example, you've got here the 1533 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's retroactive, so that's not time setting. But if you were to take that 1533 days from Biden's inauguration and project that into the future as a mirror, and then set a date based on that and say that it's typifying an event, that, to my understanding, that would be time setting an event, time setting with time.
Okay, so to me, time setting is predicting an event based upon a date. So if I said, I put a date in the future and I say on this date, this is going to happen, that would be time setting. But we've had lots of dates that we had projected in the future, even way back before July 18th had passed, that we had marked. Some of them Daniel Vanderhorst had marked, dates like August 13th, which we understood were just symbolic dates. We didn't say, well, August 13th, because it's a symbol of Palmani, and it was part of the structure of our dates. So we didn't say, well, that we then are expecting an event on that date. We thought, something could happen. It might be internal, or there might be something that occurs on that date. But we couldn't say what it would be. And so my understanding of placing dates in the future, whether they're dates that exist on a calendar already, like November 8th, something that has been, the midterm election is then, because we had some dates that were already projected by other people based upon the structure, and things did occur in connection with those dates, but we could not understand them until the time had passed. So My understanding of it is that we are to measure the time, not so that we can predict events, but so that after the time has passed, we can understand the significance of the events that do occur, and especially as they relate to this movement internally. That is, most of what we have seen, even though there's external events, that they witness to internal symbolism within the movement. That it's not so much about, so for instance, January 6, 2021, its significance for us is tied up with all of the dates and times that we have established before. So we know it's 187 days from the end of the 100 days of prayer, and we had marked March 27th, 2020, which was the start of the 100 days of prayer, and which went to July 4th, and July 4th is a symbol of the first day of the first month for the United States. And so the 187 days going to January 6th marks January 6th as the 10th day of the 7th month. It also happens to be the 22nd day of the 10th month on the biblical calendar. So it has the symbol of October 22nd. And then it marks the beginning of 10 days of prayer that are going to end on January 16th. And so January 16th had already been marked by the brother from Vietnam, based upon dividing the 777 days into 434 days and 343. So that happened to be the 434th day of the 777 structure. And so he had marked that date, but he didn't know what was going to happen on that date. So I think it's important that we look at dates in the future, whether they're chosen, such as the November 8th election, or whether they're just looking at this symbolic structure. That is, we don't have to have anything happen on January 11th, 2023 for the symbolism of this structure to give witness to what Colin has presented. So even though Colin's not putting literal days here, right? He's not marking these dates, December 24th, 2022 and January 11th, 2023. But when we put those dates there, we have this witness that this structure is sound. So that would give validity to the basic idea that Colin is presenting, right?
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. And yeah, like looking at a retrospective analysis of events and then a retrospective calculation of dates, days or weeks, hours, seconds, whatever, is one thing. But yeah, so I think people are quite leery though of something where, like for example, the 219 French Republican weeks,
Well,
those are between two scheduled, that's a retrospective.
Yeah. But so I don't know why people would be leery if we're not predicting anything. That is, we're not
predicting
anything on January.
I think it's quite, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I know it's not predictive. It's just a different focus. It's a focus on looking at the numbers rather than events and the symbols of the King of the South, the King of the North. Those kinds of things I don't see them on your chart, and maybe you do have them at some point, but it's just a different focus.
Okay, so the way that we have understood what has happened in the past is that we have always been wrong. Right? You would agree with us there that everything that we have tried to predict has been wrong. That is, we could not predict events. We haven't been able to do it yet. But we've had witness of the structure to those dates and symbols. So we saw with Odilio, he was using, for instance, the 780 days when he was going through the mandates. And we could see that symbol was sound because 780 days is 18,720 hours. We can also see it has a symbol of 111 weeks, and with the inclusion of 3 days, so this 259,200 seconds is 3 days. So this is kind of hard to explain without going into some of the other structures, but this symbol comes from 25920 is the number of parts of a Hebrew day. So it's naturally going to be that 3 days is going to be this many seconds, but it's 111 weeks, and the symbol of 3 days can be understood this. I could have put it 111 weeks and 3 days, but this witness goes from this November 22nd date. So November 22nd is a date that's passed, and in Colin's chart, he doesn't put the date there. He counts these 19 days and the 46 days, which he's doing an inclusive count. So when we put November 22nd here, November 22nd becomes a symbol. And that symbol goes all the way back to 977 BC on the 15th day of the 8th month, when Jeroboam is offering on the altar in Bethel. And the prophet comes in and gives the prophecy regarding Josiah. And that's November 22nd. So we have this symbol of November 22nd that goes back at least to that. There's other connections with this as well. So Colin has these dates. He just doesn't put that date here. He does put January 6th and he does put November 3rd. So this date then is implied. And if we count from that date, it's going to bring us to, with this line here, where is this? Is that, no, I'm looking at the wrong date. Actually, I need to look at this date. This is actually November 3rd. So I'm going to go back to the election date that's coming up. Or this is the one that's passed. This is Biden's election. And if I count here, I get 781 days. So this is 1 day more. If I did it the other way, it's 780. And that's because of how he's doing the count. So 781 days is also a symbol of July 18th, just in reverse. And we can see that if we take the number 187, 187 is 11 times 17. 71 times 11 is 781. So this is a mirror. Now this isn't that unusual with any number that's, not anybody, but lots of numbers that are divisible by 11 have this characteristic that they show the inversion of the number that's the product, right? So, but this is an interesting idea that we can take 781 symbolizes July 18th, just as 780 days also symbolizes July 18th. So here we're going from the center of this one and the center of this one. So there's the two centers. We also have just this witness from Trump's election to the midterm election coming on November 9th. We have 2,190 days. Now, it's 219 French Republican weeks because there's 10 days in a week in the French Republican calendar. So it's just kind of something that Iran noted that he thought might be significant just as a symbol. But we can also see from Trump's win to Biden's inauguration is 219 weeks. So again, we have that 219 weeks, as well as the 1,533 days. 1,533 days is the number of days from August 11th, 1840 to October 22nd, 1844. And so these symbols are coming from past prophecies. And then all we're doing is taking these symbols that we've already been given, that we've already been using. And when we analyze the literal time of what Colin is talking about, it bears witness to it. Never do we simply take a structure and predict a date in the future in a very simplistic way. That is, there always is multiple witnesses that it's part of a structure that we already have. So when we go from the siege of Washington, D.C., to this at the end of these 46 years, so the end of the 46 years is going to go to December 24th, 2022. It's 718 days. And so this is an important symbol. And if we go between the siege of Washington, D.C. to the midterm election in 2022, it's 672 days. And 672 days is 7 times 8 times 12. So these numbers contain all of the symbols of July 18, 2020, except the 0. So 1872. It's just in a different order. So a different iteration. So I don't think there should be any apprehension on the part of placing a date in the future. Now, this was one of the things that the December 6th declaration that was put out by FFA back in 2020 said that we couldn't do. So they didn't like the fact that we still had December 25th, 2021 in the future. But we remember that the first presentation that Colin did on the understanding of Daniel chapter 3 in connection with Revelation 17 and Daniel chapter 11, verse 1 to 3, was done on December 25th. We also had a bunch of light that came from Stephen in his studies. And what we saw on December 25th was not some event fulfilled, but we saw that the line that we had was attached to an increase of light. And this is the thing that I've mostly noticed about the dates that we have been projecting. They are projecting the light from the midnight cry into the future to give light for our feet, not so that we can predict events, but that as events unfold, we can see what's at our feet, so we know that we're on the right course. So these are an objective witness. Now, when it comes to our interpretation of future events and what could occur, what we find is that we are wrong. That is, we're not able to predict what events are going to occur or on a certain date, or what even the significance of that date is. And why is this? So why are we not able to do this? What did God teach us about this? So what have we been learning as we've gone through the last year and a half or so? Since July 18th, what has God been trying to teach us? Anyone? Okay, anybody? Has anybody learned anything since July 18th? Just on a personal level of what God's trying to teach us.
There's a lot of symbols.
Okay, so there's a lot of symbols. Yeah, and we know that. So God's taken these symbols, and these symbols all come from where, Iran?
Scripture and historical events, I guess.
Yeah, so from the past. And we've added a few, though most of them we already had by July 18th. There's a few that we've noticed, Odilio brought in the 1629 symbol. But it's actually just attached to these other symbols in the way that it's produced. But what is God trying to teach us about ourselves and about the movement? That we already kind of knew, but he's teaching us more deeply, I guess. Have we learned anything from July 18th? Let's start there. Did July 18th teach us anything?
Repeating the past.
Okay, so we're repeating the past, yeah. And now we already knew we were repeating the past. Did we learn about where we were repeating the past, or what past we were repeating more closely? Bonnie, you have a thought?
No, I just wanted someone to explain what past has been repeated that has been learned.
Okay, so Millerite history. So we've always taught that we're repeating Millerite history. So Daniel Fontenot brought out really clearly that July 18th was a repeat of the Great Disappointment. Now, did we expect that we were going to have a disappointment on July 18th?
No.
Yeah.
No. So when our disappointment happened, we recognized that we were repeating the disappointment of the Millerites. And that we probably should have expected it. But of course, if we had expected it, we wouldn't have had a disappointment, right? So it's kind of one of those little things that had to happen. Now, we had hints of it. So Jeff had presented the idea that our July 18th prediction was Abraham offering up Isaac. Also that it was parallel to Jonah giving a prediction, the 40 days. And in both of those, does Abraham actually offer up Isaac? Does he kill him?
Doesn't follow through with it.
Okay, so yeah, because God stops him. But if we look at the parallel, what would we say about him offering up Isaac that would be a parallel with July 18th? Is Abraham being tested?
Yep.
Okay. Were we being tested with July 18th?
Yes.
Yeah. So we can see that we were being tested. Did we have the faith to go through with the whole process of warning people in Nashville? Did we believe God? Our faith was being tested. Now, some people after July 18th, they lost their faith in the message. They basically just repudiated it, right? They rejected it in the end. The December 6th, 2020 declaration basically is a rejection of the entire message, because there's no way that you can just reject July 18th without rejecting all of the things that led to it. And Jeff understood this quite well, that July 18th was basically where everything that he had ever studied led to. that this was the culmination of all these years of study, that everything now came together with this prediction. And so we can see the parallel with Millerite history. So we experienced something that said we were repeating Millerite history. Now, the other thing, just directly to answer Bonnie's question about what history we're repeating, one of the things that we had always taught is that that the parable of the 10 virgins has been fulfilled and will be fulfilled again to the very letter. And in understanding this, I think for the first time we came to understand that this is the first and second angel's messages that are being repeated to the very letter. Now, we also spent a lot of time studying the foundation of the message, and in doing so, we came to understand that that this movement is really about the Sunday law. It was from the beginning. Jeff's focus always was about the coming Sunday law, and he would attach the Sunday law to Revelation chapter 18. After 9/11, he had to try to understand what had happened at 9/11, and he then attached the first 3 verses to 9/11. So the symbols that he had for the Sunday law, he tied to 9/11. And as we've gone through these studies, especially over the last year, we came to understand that this movement, 9/11, is actually part of the Sunday law. That is, we're zooming into the waymark that Ellen White sees as the Sunday law. And that's what this movement is. That is, in order for the Sunday law to come in Ellen White's line, we need to have a repeat of Millerite history. That is, the first and second angel's messages need to be repeated, because the Sunday law is the third angel's message. That is, at the Sunday law, according to Ellen White, the mighty angel of Revelation 18 comes down, and then it's going to join the third angel, and that message will swell to a loud cry. Now, we have a midnight cry that precedes the Sunday law, and that midnight cry is a repeat of Millerite history. But Ellen White and Jeff, prior to 9/11, clearly show that the parallel to the midnight cry in Millerite history is the loud cry that happens after the Sunday law. But we have a midnight cry that happens before the Sunday law. And this was a contradiction or a problem that wasn't really resolved, or we didn't have a good answer to, until after July 18th. That we can see that this is the Sunday law, that repeat of, that is, we can't just take the midnight cry from Millerite history and apply it to the midnight cry of our history as what Ellen White is talking about. We have to see that ours is a repeat of history, or a type of what's going to happen during the loud cry. So these things, of course, there's lots involved in this, and we've been addressing these in different ways, these ideas, in studying different things, and we're seeing now in studying the stories in the Bible, these same things happening again and again. So we studied in detail Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and then, of course, Caleb and Moses, and all these history, Moses and Joshua, and Caleb and Joshua, all this history. Now we're in the time of Joshua, and we're seeing all these same symbols showing up, and all the same waymarks showing up, and the same thing where we can zoom into a waymark and see an entire reform line. So our reform line is just a zooming in to the waymark of the Sunday law. So we go through all that because what we're trying to understand right now is what it means when we look at an event in the future. So we know there's this midterm election, and we know that it's witnessed to as part of this structure. Now, we also know that we have raffia happen at January 6, 2021. So the siege of Washington, D.C., we understand to be a typical raffia. So why do I say it's a typical raffia? Why do I say it's a type? Because what is raffia, according to our understanding of them? What did we look at raffia as in the past? Because we attached raffia to November 9th originally. So what was raffia supposed to be? Just in its simple understanding.
The king of the north falling and the king of the south rising.
Okay, so the Battle of Raffia in the past was going to typify what was going to happen. So who was the king of the north in our understanding?
We're thinking of Trump and Biden, Trump being the king of the north and Biden being the king of the south in this instance.
But back in the past with November 9th, we weren't talking about Biden. So in November 9th, we had that marked as raffia. So who was the king of the north on November 9th? That we were predicting, that this movement predicted, and Jeff was part of that. So the king of the north would be the United States, and the king of the south would be Russia. So I'm just reading Iran's chat notes there. So Russia is going to be the king of the south. That's what we were teaching. Now, Jeff was teaching this, first presented raffia and Paneum together in Alberta on January 14th, 2016. Or 2017, pardon me, I think it is 2017. January 14th, 2017. And this is after he had heard about raffia when he was in Wales back in December of, I think it was December 17th, if I remember, 2016. So he's going to be in Alberta, he's going to present this, and this is going to be part of the structure. That is, it's going to be, just to remind us, I know this isn't.
Yeah, can you refresh my memory?
Yeah.
Maybe others are familiar with it. I'm sorry, but I'm not aware where Jeff mentioned Russia. I mean, obviously, Russia was the king of the South, but that is the dragon power that then shifts over to the United Nations.
Yeah, but he never
So
had
I don't.
He never had it shift to the United Nations, though. So back when he presented this, I'm going back to what he had presented. He's going to present this on January 14th. You see it here, 2017. And that's going to be 1,533 days before March 27th, 2021. And March 27th, 2019, with March 27, 2020 in the center, it's going to be 1,533 weeks to March 27th, 2019, from November 9th, 1989. So we have these witnesses, and this is going to be the fall of the Soviet Union. And so what we see here is that Jeff, in January 14th, he's going to start to understand the idea that the head is Moscow, that it only came up to the neck. And so he's going to look at the king of the south was not defeated in 1989, that it's still going to be Russia. So the idea that we're transferring it to the UN, as far as I know, I'm the first one who did that. So I did that in connection with January 6th, 2021. We weren't doing that. We weren't changing the king of the south from Russia until after the siege, and maybe even a little bit before that. But so the idea.
So I remember, Jeff. I remembered when that was discussed, like coming up to the neck. I thought that was after 2017. I mean, I've watched that video. I was there in person.
Mm-hmm.
I know the focus was pandemic, Pandora's box, and and raffia and panium, but yeah, don't.
Yeah, he had
And I know we were talking.
Yeah. Mhm.
We were talking about, you know, Daniel chapter 11, verse whatever it was, 42, where, you know, the whole of the USSR fell, but not in that.
Not all the
I
details.
don't recall
so
that being a
it's
focus of
developed.
that lecture.
Remember the talk
Mm.
about whether it's going to be a hot war or a cold war, and then it was between Russia and the U.S. Right, so that was discussed.
Yes, hot war, cold war, the electromagnetic pulse, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So Jeff
Mhm.
later, as he studied into this, addressed the idea of how the Soviet Union didn't get completely
Later. Mhm.
right. So
That's right. That
was
was later
development.
after that. Yes.
That was a development. He didn't do that all on January 14th. I'm not suggesting.
No, no.
But he started at least with the idea that Russia was not at the end, because Russia's now going to be involved in raffia and panium. So that's how we understood it in 2017. And so he developed that understanding through 2017.
Yeah, that there would be a reversal of what happened with the fall of the Berlin Wall,
Yeah,
the king of the north against the king of the south, that it would be a reversal of 30 years hence.
right.
That's
So
why we were looking at November 9th of 2019.
exactly. So it took time for this all to develop. It all didn't happen overnight. So Jeff didn't have all everything put together. But Jeff never taught that the UN is the king of the South. He actually taught it.
Yeah, we talked about that actually. I remember learning about that for years at, like, whenever somebody new would come into our Bible study, we would go over the statue of Daniel 2, the kingdom of glory, the kingdom of grace, you know, the first 4 kingdoms and the last 4 kingdoms. And it was always translated in the kingdom of grace that the 7th kingdom would be the United Nations. That's been for years.
We understand that, but I'm saying that the symbol of the king of the South, Jeff spoke against attaching that to the UN. So that was something he was pretty clear that he wasn't looking at the UN as the king of the South. He was looking at Russia as the king of the South.
Yes, in the Battle of Panium, yes.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
in
and
the
he never did
kingdoms,
change that view. He never changed that view. You won't find anywhere where Jeff said, now I'm going to attach the symbol of the king of the South to the UN. Because when January 6th happened, it was very difficult to convince people of that point, because Jeff had been so adamant about the idea that the king of the South is Russia. And so we didn't have the symbol of the king of the South attached to the UN. That is, as far as I know, I'm the one who developed that idea and how that happens.
Oh yeah. It wasn't the United Nations that was coming against, that was, you know, part of the Battle of Panium. It was not the United Nations. That
Right.
was never brought up. It was
Exactly.
an understanding that it was a mirror of the king of the north being defeated by the king of the south, or
Right.
sorry, attacking the king of the south, the USSR, Russia,
Right. And
in
exactly.
1989, 30 years
Exactly.
hence.
Yeah. And that's the point that I'm making, that Jeff never attached that to the UN, that symbol of the king.
That was never, no, that was not appropriate for that timeline, that retrospective analysis, or even predictive analysis, looking at past events and looking at Daniel 11, verse whatever, 42 or 40, 41, 40, where, you know, there's the reversal, but in the kingdoms, in, you know,
Right, but that's
there was an understanding that,
we all agree.
yeah,
with
yeah, so
we all know that. So that's
okay.
that's not what we're talking about, though. We're not talking about the kingdoms. We're talking about raffia and panium. So those were never attached to the way that Colin is doing it now, the way that we're doing this now, looking at January 6th as being the globalists, as being raffia. That's something that Jeff never would have done, because he never had the globalists as the king of the South. In that context of that king of the North, king of the South, duality.
Well, I think the King of the South in Colin's presentation is the Democrats of the United States,
Mhm.
you know, whatever they're the puppet for, but it is
But it's,
looking,
yeah, because they were overcome
yeah,
by
so,
globalists. Yeah, we understand that. So I don't,
Mhm.
well, at least I,
Mhm.
and I think all of us who've been studying this, we know. But I'm not so much focusing upon what Colin is doing here. I'm just saying that when Jeff did this with Raffia and Paneum, he never attached that history to Raffia.
no.
But now we are, right? And we can go
So
to
you're
the
doing it retrospectively, attaching the United Nations, you mean? You're attaching the United Nations to
what we're saying is the
Russia?
United Nations is the king of the South, that Russia is not the king of the South in this raffia, that we're attaching the Democrats, who are globalists, which is part of the United Nations agenda. That's what happened on January 6th. That is, the United States was conquered by Greece on January 6th.
Well, if
Because
I think, yeah, if you want to say, okay, Greece, I mean, you're looking more globally rather than, you know, ethnocentrically at the United States.
well, the United States is conquered by Greece. So when we look at Trump as Xerxes, so this is part of the disagreement, I guess, I have with Colin, if you want to put it as a disagreement. But right now, what we're doing is studying. So no conclusions have been drawn completely. Everything that Colin is doing, everything that we're doing and looking at what Colin is doing, and everything that we have done even previously leading up to that, is we're looking at information and we're trying to bring all of the information together so that we can get the full picture. We haven't drawn conclusions. We have tentative, solutions, but we can't say we know everything, and we're going to be really definite about all of this. Right now, we're just studying. But when it came to January 6th, so I'll go back to this diagram, wherever it is. So when we got to the siege of Washington, D.C., we had all of these symbols that showed that it typified even what we were predicting with July 18th. That is, July 18th was a typification. And Washington, D.C., the siege, was connected to December 25th, 2020, with the bombing that happened in Nashville by 13 days. It was connected to the pandemic. It was connected to the structure of the days of prayer. It was connected to all of these different things. And the way that we understood Washington, D.C., at least the way that our study group that I've been doing had understood it, is that the symbols here with Washington, D.C. showed, with the siege, showed that we were on the right track, but we still didn't know how to address the fact that we saw this as raffia, but who were the players? Now, when we looked at the Civil War, so Heidi and I had spent time back in 2018 studying the Civil War, and that study was sort of shut down, and then it was hijacked by Tess. So Tess ended up doing some things with the Civil War that were completely different than what we saw in the Civil War. So the American Civil War, you have the king of the South is the Democrats, and the king of the North is the Republicans. So we can see that quite clearly. And this goes back to the Civil War. So what we had done is we had connected the Civil War in the revolutions and the civil wars. So we had connected what happened when the kingdom divided in 977, when Jeroboam took over the northern kingdom, and Rehoboam took over. Rehoboam was the king of the south, right? And then we're going to see a civil war again in 742. And we know that civil war in 742 is connected to the civil war in the 1860s. And how is it connected? How do we connect that Civil War?
North and south?
Well, how do we connect the Civil War in the United States in the 1860s? How do we connect that with the Civil War in 742 BC? So as Iran puts in the chat there, it's the prophetic mirror, the 22520s give us this structure. So that's this structure here, right? So we know that this structure of the 19 and the 65, and then this span of time, and then the 46 and the 19, comes to us from the prophetic mirror. That's the way that Colin did it in his study. He put the prophetic mirror up at the top, and then he says, well, raffia and Paneum then is representing the Civil War in the United States, and that this Civil War that happens where Trump loses becomes the king of the South defeating the king of the North. That's raffia. And then we have this midterm election, and we're going to say that that's going to be Trump winning. So the king of the North then is going to win and eliminate the king of the South. So that's going to be Paneum. That's the study that Colin is presented. That's how he's looking at this. And he's looking at the Republicans and the Democrats as representing the king of the South and the king of the North, respectively. He's also tying in the 19th Republican president and the 46th president of the United States, as well as the 45th there. So we know that he's taking these symbols, which he had already established before with the 20 and the 19. So what was the 20 and the 19? Anybody remember Colin's studies on the 20 and the 19? Tabo ended up
Yes,
using it. So Bonnie?
presidents of the conference,
Yeah,
conference presidents.
so there he's using the king of the North as who? King of the North would be who in that study of the 20 and the 19? Because which kingdom has 19 kings? Which kingdom has 20 kings?
I think it was a comparison of I'm not sure. Just go, no, it's not Wilson. Ted Wilson, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he becomes the king of the Adventist conference represents, as the remnant.
Judah.
Judah, that's correct.
That's
Judah,
the
which is the
southern
southern
right? Okay.
kingdom
And the king of the North,
against
which would be the Protestants, the United
Israel.
States. Okay. So
Right.
we have Northern Kingdom is the Republican Party represents the Northern Kingdom, but the South is not represented by the globalists in that study. It's representing Judah and Israel, so it becomes an internal line. But now in this line, we're just taking these same symbols, or at least some of the symbols, and we're addressing the United States itself, which would be normally the king of the North. That is, in this case, Biden as the 46th president, he can't be the king of the North. And why not? Why can't Biden be the king of the North? You understand what I'm asking? So there's some things that aren't quite clear at least in my mind with Colin's study, because I had a talk with him about it. And I mean, he's not marking Biden as a continuation of Trump, right? So Biden himself, he's the 46th president, so we have him there as a symbol. But this is more about the Democrats rather than Biden, correct? Yeah, Biden represents atheism. He represents this spiritual power. He represents the king of the South, right? Now,
No. Oh, well, yeah, the king of the South, yes.
right,
Yeah.
right. So that's what Biden would represent, but it's mostly the Democrats, right? It's not so much about Biden because Biden would just be seen as a puppet. He's definitely not really running the show. So when we look at the siege of Washington, D.C. on January 6th, we'd have to say, well, it's going to be these 65 days, which is an inclusive count or an ordinal count, past the November 3rd election. So Trump loses this election on November 3rd. And we'd say, well, normally you're just going to wait till the inauguration and then Biden comes into play. But God in his providence had this event occur that basically that's really where you're going to mark the end of the United States. And Trump is the last president of the United States. So even though the Democrats continue the United States, they can't continue to be the king of the North. The Democrats now are the king of the South. Where the United States is the king of the North. Right? That's how we understood it. Whether they were Republican or Democratic presidents, we didn't have them switch back and forth between king of the North, king of the South. Right? It's all just the United States. It's Protestantism. But when Biden comes in, this changes. We can now say that's the end of the United States in a prophetic sense, because the Democrats control the United States. So in this study, Colin is saying, well, and we're going to look into this in the coming weeks, but what I'm trying to set out here is the problem. So the problem, without looking at Revelation 17, which we're going to do, and we're going to look at other histories, biblical histories, and histories of the United States and the Civil and Republican Wars, or the Revolutionary Wars within the United States, and how these are typifying what's happening now. But we know that what's happening now is also a typification. And we know that because Ellen White is predicting this coming Sunday law. So she predicts a Sunday law. But she only tells us about a repeat of history in connection with that Sunday law. And we know that in Millerite history, in early Adventist history, Christ could have come, that is, the events of the Sunday law could have occurred in that history, but they didn't. And Parminder and Tess cleverly muddied the waters for us when it comes to looking at 1863 and 1888 and all that history in connection with what they were talking about regarding there's not going to be a Sunday law. And it's something that they actually had some ideas that were correct, but they mixed a bunch of error with it. And we know that that's what Satan does. He takes truth, he mixes it with error because he wants to make it more palatable. But also he wants people to ignore the truth. He wants us to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So in studying,
Can I just sorry,
Yeah.
Theodore, I'm sorry. I just need to, before we lose the point, because I think just going back a couple of minutes ago to what you were saying, that the United States has come to an end when you remember making that comment, because it's just a different line. In my understanding, it's just a different line. It's just like a focusing in, just like, Northern Israel, Southern Israel, and then, making a comparison between the United States and the Adventist Conference. It doesn't mean it's the end of the United States because the Adventist Conference comes in. It's a different line. It's like a fractal. It's repeating the same thing.
That's exactly
And
the point.
to my understanding,
Yeah. Go on.
yeah. So there's nothing inconsistent that I'm seeing.
I never said there was.
I'm not seeing anything inconsistent.
I never said anything was inconsistent.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
had to use that word. No,
Well, I mean, in my understanding, it's inconsistent if you're saying the United States has ended with Joe Biden, because
No, so-
there is going to be another presidential election. And yeah, I mean, the roles change depending on who is being compared with who, right? Because it's a different line,
Yeah, that's
is
that's
the way that
why
I
we can
understand
say
it.
the United States ended on January 6, 2021. So yeah, so I'm not saying
Well, the
that.
line of looking at the United States, yeah. I think that's kind of confusing to say it that way, though,
Okay,
because it's
okay,
Democrats and Republicans, right?
yeah,
Within the United States.
okay. So I'll address that point. So when we say that the United States ended, what we're doing is we're looking at our lines. We made predictions, but those predictions that we were making, we misunderstood, just like the Millerites misunderstood the time in which they were, right? That is, they didn't understand that the Christ's work in the holy place was going to begin. They just thought everything would be wrapped up. They didn't see that separation of Christ, or not holy, the most holy place beginning and the holy place ending. So they saw everything with the most holy place would just happen in a day, because the Day of Atonement's a day. But we know that that Day of Atonement is a period of time, and it took them time to understand that. But when we studied what the Millerites taught, the thing that we found is that they weren't wrong in an essential sense. That is, they weren't doing misapplications of prophecy and getting things all wrong. What they were doing is not fully understanding the implications of what they were saying. So,
Right, because just to interject there, they didn't understand, well, they knew, but they kind of left it out or forgot that
yeah,
Christ had to go into the holy place before the most holy place. It's like basic understanding
yeah,
for Adventists.
right. And also they had a whole bunch of things that had to happen before Jesus comes back.
Mhm.
And none of those things happened, and they just set them aside, right?
Right, and that's what Colin is saying, that we did the same thing looking at Trump being the last president, because wait a minute, if you look at the application of the riddle, it's the eighth kingdom has to come, and how can it be without having like being resurrecting somebody from the previous seven?
Yeah, I
That's the
understand.
parallel that he's drawing with Millerite history.
Yeah, and I think just the only mistake he's making, as far as I can tell, is saying that it has to be Trump. That's the only problem I have with anything that he's saying. Everything else,
So you're thinking,
I
so
agree.
then, okay, I understand that. So, but if there has to be well, I'm not saying there has to be anything. It's just looking at the Bible, what the Bible is saying, and drawing conclusions that the eighth is of the seven. So the eighth has to be one of the previous seven. If we're looking at that application, if we're applying that riddle to this situation,
Okay,
that's the only reason for saying Trump, because
I
he
understand.
was
But
already one of the previous.
yeah, the only thing is that we have other precedents that we have to look at. So
Okay.
that's what we're going to be doing. Because when I first started this study after December 25th, so whatever date that was, the next Friday, and I laid out the problem of what the path that we have to go on is that we have to look at all of the information. That is, we can't just take some of the pieces and look at them. We need to look at everything. So we have precedents, and one of the precedents that we had with the eighth had to do with the last seven kings, and we're going to look at that next week, and we're going to go back over this. But we had the last seven kings of Judah. And then we're going to have the kingdom's going to be overturned, overturned, overturned until he come whose right it is. So we know that the eighth is Christ. So we have seven kings, but there, the eighth is going to be Christ. And the question is, why can we do that? Because we know that there's a parallel between the kings of Judah, the kings of Persia, the kings of Israel, right? Both at the beginning and the endings, but all of them come to play. And the United States here, we have then the same sort of picture, right? We have the same history, the last 7 kings of the United States, if you want to put it that way. And we never really understood what we were doing, particularly with some of this. So now when we look at this, my suggestion is simple. Let's look at everything. Let's look at how the Millerites understood things. Maybe we can draw something from that we've missed. Let's look at all of the past histories that deal with 7 kings. And can we see an 8th? And if there's an 8th, how is that to be understood? That's all I'm saying. So
Yeah, and
the
I
fact
can
that,
I can see that. But
yeah,
my question about doing that with the last 7 kings of Judah is that, to extrapolate that there has to be an 8th from the 7 of those kings simply because of this riddle. If that is in fact what you're saying, it's not really a parallel with what Colin is teaching, because what Colin is doing is looking at chapter 3 of Daniel, saying that, okay, why did Nebuchadnezzar use a millennial man? Why did he use a statue of a man that was all gold? The statue of the man exemplifies the kingdoms, a sequential succession of kingdoms, but because it's all gold, it's the topic is worship. And so I think it's really specific doing that application to that, in that theme of worship. And to say that it's parallel with the last 7 kings of Judah or Israel, whatever, is not the same thing, because that was not part of the millennial statue, and it's not representing kingdoms. It's like 1 kingdom, 7 kings, but it's not up to do with worship either, which is the theme of all of this, because we're talking about a Sunday law.
Yeah, I
We're
understand.
talking about a Sunday law, which is the theme of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And like in terms of predictions, we're cautioned not to predict times, but events. We're not said, even Ellen White predicted an event. We all as Adventists predict an event, right? So to look for the waymarks and to look for the symbols of that event is really important to do. And with an advancing light.
So when we use time here,
yeah, which is what
we're not
you're saying
predicting
is
time.
to look at everything, which is like a macroscopic vision, to look at everything. How can you actually pick out the salient things that relate to a topic? That's my confusion anyways.
Well, it takes time.
I'll silence myself.
Yeah, it takes time to do that. So when we did this, we started learning lots of things that we didn't know. And all of those things that we didn't know have all come together in both in Colin's studies and in Odilio's studies and in Stephen's studies and in our morning studies. So when we start to look at everything, and now I understand, people can just say, well, that's a lot of information. But we're just taking time to do that. Once we get everything sorted out, then you will see how these things are all connected. I don't think that you can say that, because I agree with Colin, that what he says about Daniel chapter 3 and also what he says about Daniel chapter 11, except just some little details. And that's because we have other witnesses that do relate to this, and they also relate to other things that we are studying. So that is, everything that we are studying is telling us the same thing. That is, it's not telling us something different. Everything's coming together. Now, in presenting this, I have to present it in bits and pieces, right? That is, if we're going to understand this, one is we have to study it together, and we're learning as we go. But in no way are we saying that we're going to just dismiss anything that Colin is saying, or anything that Odilio's saying, or anything that Daniel's saying, anything that anyone's saying. We're just saying that we're taking the time to look at it and to understand it fully. And part of understanding it fully, if we're going to understand the present, we need to understand the past. So we look at the things of the past, things that we missed. And the reason we missed it is because we weren't at that time yet that past was shining on our path. So if you remember what Ellen White says, that as we pass over the ground of fulfilled prophecy, those events will reflect upon past events, and those past events will shine light forward into our time to give light for our feet. It's kind of a paraphrase of what she's saying, but the events in the past, and that's as we pass over the ground of fulfilled prophecy. Now, the witness that's been given this movement has been these dates, right? So when we passed January 6th, 2021, then we saw, oh, this is connected to part of this structure that we had. But we didn't predict January 6th. And just because we put some dates in the future doesn't mean we're predicting any events on those dates. They're just part of the structure that's already been given to us. So this structure here, Colin gave us this structure, right? He's the one who compared the prophetic mirror with, as he says, raffia and panium, right? So all we did is look at the literal time that's there, but we're not saying that anything has to happen on January 11th, 2023. That is, the symbols there of 46 and 19 could relate to something else completely different. All we have is a witness that these dates are part of a structure, but it's not predicting an event. And that needs to be really clearly understood, that when we do this, we're not time setting, and we're not accusing anybody of time setting when they put a date in the future. Unless you would say, on this date, I believe that this is going to happen, and that, that's going to be a test for everybody or something like that. Then I would say, well, that's kind of time setting, because we've always been wrong. And I think that we must expect that it's not until those events pass, that we're connecting with these dates. We're connecting November 8th, the midterm election. And then we have the structure. But we know that after that time passes, then we may understand what those dates meant or what they were referring to. But to say that we can know because we put a date in the future, that such and such an event must happen, we should have learned from July 18th. We can't do that. We should have learned from November 27th.
Yeah, but that was a date. And what's being put in the future with Colin studies is not a date, but a symbol. And it's not anyone from Adventism who is saying November 8th. That's externally established by independent actors.
Right, and that's
So
exactly what we're doing.
That is the event
as a symbol, right? So this is a symbol.
It's nothing to do with dates.
But dates are symbols, right?
It's nothing to do with dates except as yeah, but the time spans, you see, the time spans, what are those symbolizing? Like, it's just me probably, I'm not privy to know what 718 stands for, what 781 stands for.
Well,
is it part of the theme of South versus North?
718 is July 18th, right?
Well, I understand that, but is that in the same theme as King of the South versus King of the North? Right?
Well,
because
we have July 8th. What did we say July 18th was?
On what level? Many different levels. I mean, looking at all the information.
But we said July 18th was
that.
Panium, right? So July 18th is a symbol of Panium. We would have to agree with that.
Okay, so then you're connecting the symbol of raffia, 19 and 46, the 65 days, with Panium.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay,
that's what
between raffia and Panium.
So because that's what the symbols tell us. So when we do this, we're not all we're doing is analyzing. This is just analysis. I didn't put the date November 8th there, right? Colin did that. But when he did that,
Exactly.
and he put the
Well,
65
the United
days
States.
at each end, and he divided them, even though he's not giving literal days, but he divided them as 19 and 46 and 46 and 19. He also wrote these dates out. He just didn't put them on his chart, but he said he already figured out those dates, right? So all I did, I just analyzed them. So again, I wouldn't say that we could predict that anything's going to happen on December 24th or anything's going to happen on January 11th. I actually wouldn't expect anything to happen on those dates. All we have is symbols. And we can see that 718 is a symbol of July 18th. 780 days is a symbol of July 18th. 781 days is a symbol of July 18th, because 71 times 11 equals 781, and 187 is equal to 11 times 17. It's a mirror, right? So we can see it gives us a mirror, which is what this is, the prophetic mirror, right? That we're using.
Yeah, but
So
how can it be a mirror when it goes from the beginning of the 65-day symbol to the middle of the 65 days, or the middle
Okay.
of the 65-day symbol? That's not an actual mirror.
Okay, so think about the prophetic mirror. The prophetic mirror begins in 742 BC and ends in 1860. Do we have any spans of time that begin on different places in like 19 years and 46 years? And so do we have any spans of time that we count that begin in 742 and in 723 and in 677 that end on different places in connection with the 65 days on years on either side?
I don't think that we have, if we look at the 65 and break it, like, because it breaks down into the 19 and 46, I don't think we have any spans of time that go from the beginning of the 65 days to the middle, like to the end of the 46 days.
Okay, well, we do. So,
Okay.
so we've already connected those before. So if you wanted to look at this and you wanted to put the years, you put 742 BC, 723 BC, 677, and then you would put 1798, 1844, and 1863, right?
Correct.
Now, we connect some of these, but in different ways, right? So we don't just have the two 2520s and that's it. We have a whole bunch of other connections that we have done. And Stephen has done a lot of these to connect these different dates. So,
but do we have something then specifically that connects, say, the middle of one with the beginning of the other, or the end of one with the middle of the other?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So you're just not familiar with the structures of the sabbatical cycles and the jubilee cycles that we did, right?
And do those tie into the theme of whatever?
Because that's
whatever
what this
the topic is?
2520 is about. It's about the fact that they didn't keep the sabbatical rest of the land.
Correct.
Right. So there's way more complexity in the prophetic mirror than our simple drawing of the prophetic mirror. It actually connects all of the histories all the way back to Abraham leaving Haran, all the way to our time. Okay. So we've done this in multiple ways. So, but we can't put everything here, and we can't address everything here. But yes.
But why would we? Because what is it actually showing us or telling us?
Okay. So let's take.
I mean, when you look at the line of the 2520 with, the northern and the southern tribes and captivity and all that, you can see the prophetic mirror clearly, and you understand what the theme of that line is. And the king and the north versus the south on one side, the south versus the north on the other side. But when we start looking at the sabbatical, I know that you're talking about the spans of time to do with sabbatical references. What is that telling us? I mean, there could be numbers that are interesting or, typical numbers.
No, that's not.
That we've seen before.
Okay.
But is it telling us something?
Are you familiar with the 7 times 252? This one's got a typo here. 7 times 252 years. Are you familiar
Yeah,
with it?
well, not at that diagram. I'm 1721 to 1798. No, I'm not really that familiar. I know the 252, the 2520,
Okay.
7 times. Yeah.
So from 34 AD, you have 252 years to the beginning of the 1260. Or this, pardon me, this is 504 years. This is actually not
Yeah.
a great chart. This was a working chart. So you have 504 years, which is 2 times 252, and this is 5 times 252. So from 34 AD, you have 504 years for the persecution of Christians by pagan Rome, and then 1260 years for the persecution of Christians by papal Rome. I'm going to find a better chart than this one because this doesn't have everything in it. So Stephen and I had done this back in 2016, but I'd figured out this 1764 years back in 2013. So I'd presented the latter part back in 2013 or 2014, pardon me, when we did the first camp meeting at Wabaman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I presented this, but here's the chart that Stephen and I had done. It's got a few errors on it because I expanded this, so I'll just move this over. So if we go here like this, and we put this here, what you have is the death of Jacob. This is Jacob blessing his 12 sons, right? And there's going to be 252 years to the conquest of the promised land. Okay, does that make sense?
It's a span of time, like the 2520 symbol,
right?
between those two events.
And then there's going to be 756 years till Hoshea's captivity for the 2520 starting for northern Israel. And that's going to be 3 times 252.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then from 723 to 34 AD is going to be another period of 3 times 252.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole period here is 7 times 252, from Jacob blessing his sons to the stoning of Stephen. 7 times 252 years. And it's in a structure of 3, 3, and 1. From 34 AD, it's a structure of 2 and 5. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 times 252 and 5 times 252. And I'll just get this part back over here. So there's 1798. So this structure, as we've shown, this comes from the story of Joseph, actually. So there was a paper done by Johannes Koletsky back in April of 2010. And that paper was sent to me in 2016 when I was at the School of the Prophets, when I was working out this chronology. And he understood the connection between the story of Joseph and the years of plenty and famine was connected to this 2520 here for northern Israel, going from 723 to 1798. And after working through that, Stephen asked me the question. He says, what if we count back from 34 AD? Where do we come to? And we come to the end of the prophetic mirror in the story of Joseph that Johannes Koletsky marks out. So that's the death of Jacob. But it's also when Jacob blesses his 12 sons. So we've been going through the book of, first Exodus, Genesis, Exodus, and we're now in the book of Joshua. And we came to establish this structure here of this 252 years and how it's connected to the Jubilee sabbatical cycles. So we've done a lot on this study. So if you look back at some of the morning studies, you'll see some subtitles where it talks about the Jubilee structures, and it'll go through this. But the point is, this is all connected. We can't just separate our history from all that has gone before, because if we're going to understand what's happening to us now, we're going to have to understand the past. And when Colin brings in the prophetic mirror, and places it there in connection with what's happening now. He's doing that. And that means in order to understand what those things are showing us, we must take the past for that information. We can't just guess. That's not what we're supposed to do. We have to take the time to study. And that's what Colin's doing. He's just throwing it out there for the conversations I've had with them of what he sees, what he believes was given to him. And I believe it was given to him too. So I don't argue against what Colin sees as his biblical arguments or what Odilio has presented. It's all part of this structure. What we can't do is ignore all of this information that's been given to us over the last, basically, ever since this movement began, but specifically since 2013 regarding chronology.
Okay, why can't we do that?
Because then we're ignoring what God has done. We would be basically rejecting light. Because if God gave us all this light regarding the prophecies in the past, and that understanding of the light was what gave us the predictions regarding July 18 in the first place, that even gave any witness to the fact that November 9th meant anything. If we ignore what God has given us, then we're going to just walk in darkness. We know.
Okay, but November 9th is not on the line.
What's that?
That Colin is, November 9th is not on the line that Colin is presenting. Neither is any of the factors of the sabbatical cycles, the 252. None of that is part of that line. It's a line of symbols based on Daniel chapter 3, Daniel chapter 11, verse, those things, and right. Revelation 17. So I don't really know why. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe there are some of these numbers and these lines and these structures that you're showing us now that do fit in to what Colin is presenting.
Okay.
But I think on faith, I can see it. I can see what he's presenting, and I can see what I need to be looking for in terms of waymarks for future events. And so, but I mean, this is great if in the next, 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever, you find out, you can present how all of what Colin is presenting also ties into all these time spans that have already been studied and presented. But I don't need that for faith. I mean, it's great, but so I don't know. It's very involved.
I need it for faith, because if my faith is based upon rejecting things that God has told us that we need to understand. So for instance,
no, I don't think it's a rejection. I don't think it's a rejection. I'm not rejecting anything of what you've shown me ever, right? But neither does what you're showing me negate what I'm seeing in this chart that you have up right now.
You see on this chart here, Colin puts the prophetic mirror there. So when he does that, that means he's including everything that the prophetic mirror is showing us, and that it's giving us light about the line that he just put under it, right?
Absolutely. I know the 2520 is there. And so all of that is it's like focusing, it's becoming more and more into focus. In my understanding, I guess that's how I would present an analogy about it. And it's wonderful if you can, see where the 252 and the factors of the 252 tie into this line. For me, I mean, I guess it's fantastic, but I don't need it because I already accept the 2520. No, I know that in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 8, talks about 65 years. So I've already got it.
No.
I'm not rejecting anything.
Yes, you
are.
are.
I'm not rejecting anything.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm not.
You are.
I don't.
Just let me explain it. Let me explain it better.
What am I rejecting?
Information.
How am I rejecting?
Well, if you're not taking the information.
What about faith?
Let me finish.
I believe in the 2520. There's the 2520. There's the 65. There's Daniel 11, north and south, south and north, Panium, Raffia.
Okay. So
this to me is the salient condensation of everything that we've all,
Okay, so
studied his
what will
information
you
up until
do-
this
what will
point.
you do when Trump is not reelected?
Well, I mean, as with everything, I'm still going to believe that there's a God. I'm going to believe in the scriptures. I'm going to believe in the spirit of prophecy, and
But
I'm going to believe that man is fallible. And if
are
in
you
fact that
going,
does happen,
are you going to
then
have the information to understand where you are?
so at that point, yeah, I would have to look back retrospectively, just like the Millerites did,
Okay.
which we did at July 18th, right? We looked back retrospectively. Have you determined why July 18th was a failed prediction by looking back retrospectively?
I did it before July 18th.
And did you know that it was going to be a failed prediction
Yes, that's what I
before?
presented. I presented that the symbols
Mhm.
of that line showed that July 18th could be a failed prediction. I sent that to Jeff on April 26th,
Okay.
2020. I can send you the email if you want to see it. So my view was, based upon the line of failed predictions, it appears that July 18th will not be fulfilled as we expect it to be. But
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to go against the movement. So I sent it to Jeff. I expected him to present it. I did a study, a Zoom study, and gave him my notes. And he said he would watch the study and read my notes. He never got back to me, but he was presenting at the end when he presented his morning studies before Daniel started his. He started to hint at this idea that it could be a failed prediction. He asked about it. But he never ended up bringing in any of the information that I had shared with him. So when July 18th was approaching, I still felt that we had to warn Nashville because all of the evidence showed that July 18th was this significant date. Even though I had information telling me that it could be a failed prediction, I knew that if it was a failed prediction, that would explain what I had been teaching for years regarding our line being typical, especially in 2017. So in 2017, what Samuel Snow's letters told us is that our line was typical and that we are Samuel Snow, right? So this is what Samuel Snow's letters told us. And without that information, I would have made the same decision that the people who made the December 6, 2020 declaration made. I would have just abandoned everything. But the thing is, God had been witnessing to me all along with these dates that one is that event would fail, but that fit in perfectly with my understanding of all of the information that he had given me. So then when I tried to share that with people like Larry Lesher brought up these irrelevant arguments, something about basically Josiah Litch or Hiram Edson, pardon me, had this vision the next day. And so they all knew the reason for their failed prediction. But Hiram Edson's vision, cornfield vision, wasn't generally known until 1905. So Adventists didn't know.
But except to the Millerites, you mean? But the Millerites were the ones that would be examining why their prediction failed.
Yeah, but the Millerites and Adventists didn't know about it. That is, the only people that would have known of Hiram Edson's cornfield vision might have been, well, I know that Crozier knew of it because Crozier was a friend of his. And maybe James and Ellen White might have known of it. But Adventists in general did not know of it. That is, it wasn't the reason that Adventists then immediately understood the reason for their disappointment. That is, it wasn't until 1846, in February of 1846, when Crozier's article was published, that they even had an explanation for the disappointment. But even then, it wasn't widely accepted. So to think that on January 18th, everything would be understood by everyone was unrealistic. But I understood January 18th already before January 18th. That is, I understood that if it did not occur, and I presented that on January 17th,
You mean July 18th, right?
Oh,
He
yeah.
means July. Yeah, he
Yeah,
means
July
July.
18th. July 18th.
Okay,
Looking at January 6th in front of me here.
right.
Right.
So on July 17th, I presented that evening. I again presented the line of failed predictions, and then I went over that again on the 19th. So
Okay. So
so
then what you're saying is well, that's what the Millerites did. They looked retrospectively but time had to pass to gather enough information
yeah,
to do that, to figure it out.
yeah.
So July 18th, you were a bit more proactive with that, or predictive of the failing prediction,
God was more proactive.
right?
So
Okay.
God gave us all the light that we had regarding July 18th and the lines.
Okay.
These were all actually fulfillments of prophecy. So that the date that I figured this out was already predicted, and I found it on the date that was predicted. So we had a prediction that I had made regarding an increase
Yeah.
of light, and on that date I was given an increase of light regarding the failed prediction of July 18th.
Mhm.
So
Okay. So then
yeah.
that's why you're trying to tie this in to this study, to Colin's study,
Well, it's not a
to
matter
see if there is
okay, so
any failure.
no, I wouldn't say that I'm.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're just studying all of the light that God has given us. That's what we're doing. It's not a matter of trying to do anything. It's a matter of doing what God asked us to do. So the Millerites,
Of course.
after
Of
18,
course. But how?
yeah,
How is it that, I mean, when you look at all the lines and everything, and like, I guess what would be really helpful is because you're the one that was able to predict a couple of months ahead of time. And
mhm.
even on the day of, okay, this is what has come to pass. I knew it would happen, or I suspected it would happen. And so what was it that showed you that it might fail? And so looking at this prediction now, instead of just saying it's not going to be Trump, it's going to be a failed prophecy, why not say, can we apply what happened with the Millerites and what happened with July 18th and kind of distill the reasons, the common theme as to why, and then look and see if those signs are there
That's
instead of
what we've been
applying
doing.
everything.
So
But
that's
what you're doing is applying, like you're looking at the 7 last Caesars, the 7 kings of Israel, the 7 kings of Judah, all these things, and it's like
because
really hard to pick out
okay.
what you have discovered as the salient information. It's too much information. It's not salient enough.
Okay. Have you watched all of the presentations?
I don't have time. I'm sorry, I just don't have time.
Well, then I don't know what I can do because we just
Well,
take the
because,
information as it's given to us, right? So
okay, but
now
what
what
I'm
I'm
saying
trying to
is,
do as a teacher,
I don't want to duplicate what you've already done, right? I don't want to duplicate it because you've already done it. So as a teacher, as the one who's experienced it, I mean, maybe you yourself want to go through all those different steps. That's up to you, right? But if you've experienced it, you've studied Millerite history, you know the letters of Samuel Snow, you studied the July 18th, you knew ahead of time why it wouldn't work. So it should be, I don't know, I would think that I wouldn't have to watch, I don't know, 100 different hour-long studies in order to come to the same
right,
conclusions.
and that's kind of my point. You can't
But I
watch
don't have the
everything.
time.
So what are people doing then to try to address what I'm saying? So are people interested in anything that I'm doing in the movement right now?
Well,
What are people
why
saying?
wouldn't they be? What are you asking?
Well, so people don't seem to be that interested in general in looking at these things because it's too much information. That was the
Yeah.
same thing that was being said prior to July 18th, right? That's always been said all the way along the way. It's too much information, right?
Mountaintops. We need mountaintops.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, as a teacher, I'm distilling things for everyone, but we
Still
have
don't
we
understand.
have this series on the presidents of the United States, and in order to bring all of the lines together of everything that we study, it still takes time. There's no way that I can just tell you what I think and that you just have to believe me. You're going to have to see it for yourself. And,
Okay.
and
So
what
what
I'm doing is
I'm hearing you say then
yeah,
is there's no way to repeat or distill the experience, the conviction, the way that you arrived at a conviction. There's no a way to kind of apply that distillation of experience to this current situation,
there is.
which is kind of what.
Studies
Oh.
on presidents of the United States is a distillation. But we have to go through the information. That is, if I had to present everything that I've studied, because I've presented it now, it's been more than 2 years. So that we've been doing these studies, and we were doing the 3-hour studies, prior to July 15th. So all of that information is there, but I'm constantly going over it, constantly reintroducing it, constantly showing the connections. And when it comes to what Colin is doing, he's focusing on certain chapters and trying to draw a conclusion. But I know already, based on what we have studied before, that his conclusion is wrong. And I can show that it's wrong, but I can't just tell you it's wrong. That's not going to.
But you've already done that.
Well, I have.
You've already done that.
I know, but I can't just do that. I have to show the evidence. That's what this Friday night study is and has been. It's showing the evidence, point by point, step by step, to show why I think Colin is in error regarding Trump. But I don't think Colin's in error in his basic assumptions about those chapters. I think he's
Okay.
insight
Right.
from God, but
Mhm.
but you can't ignore all of the other insights that God has been giving other people. That is, God isn't leading
So-
an individual, God's leading a movement.
Right. If you think, but God does work through individuals. Individuals have to open the door of their understanding, right?
Yeah.
That is how God works, is through individuals.
Yeah.
And then people in the movement are either receptive, open to it through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, or they're not.
Right.
And
So
I
all of the
can speak to
individuals-
that. So,
So
but if
all
you
of the-
think that if you're saying that Trump is not it, then you must have a reason. There must be
Yes,
one pivotal reason
I have lots
to
of
why
reasons, not just one. I actually
Well,
have hundreds of reasons.
prioritize them. Prioritize them. What
but-
is the most salient reason? That is what people need to hear, because your experience is valuable,
Okay.
but you need to be able to present it in a digestible manner.
Because when I tried to present it, I was told to shut up, basically. So people didn't
By
want
who?
what I had to say. Well, by initially it was what's his name? I'm bad with names, and I have to try to.
It doesn't matter. I don't think it really matters.
It was at the study. I
you
was asking questions, and Colin was resistance for answering, and it was can't think of his name offhand. Huey, right?
Oh, you're talking about Brother Huey. Oh, I was there, Theodore, and
he told me
it
to
was a
stop talking.
presentation. Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
I do a presentation and somebody is asking me lots of questions, I welcome that. Right?
Well, you are asking lots of questions too. You're asking us lots of questions, right?
Right, yeah.
You are asking to me, it seems like you do want to know where our understanding is,
Right.
because you are asking lots of questions.
And Colin had asked some questions, and I tried to answer those questions. And then I also asked some questions of my own. And for some reason, Huey thought I was being aggressive or something. I'm not sure why he thought that, because I was agreeing in principle with what Colin was saying. And I was interested on his answers, on trying to understand some points.
Do you understand it now?
Yeah, I understand his arguments. Yeah. And I've had conversations with him. And when I presented, he said I didn't misrepresent his points. He was actually surprised that I understood his points. So, but in order for me, so this is me as a human being, I'm very, very careful about how I draw a conclusion. It is, I will spend thousands and thousands of hours on something before I say I understand it. That is, I have to know things inside out. Now, I've spent lots of time on this, but not just in this study. But if I was to, and it's already happened this way, people think that I'm attacking Colin. Like the study that I did last Friday, it was understood that I was accusing him of time setting, and there's all kinds of things that Colin addressed on his Saturday night study that when I talked to him on Sunday, I cleared up. So one is, I still have never rejected the application of the seven heads in the way that this movement has done them. But I recognize they're an application, and that it's an application in a repeat of history. It's not the application that the Millerites did, but that's been misunderstood. People have think that I just simply rejected it, and that's not the case. And it's important to understand.
No, I think you did need clarification, but obviously the clarification that you would need would be on one level, a level probably different from clarification that I might need, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not. I'm not sure, but
you notice I'm not presenting any studies in the American group or the Canadian group. And the Canadian group hasn't
no, I have no idea.
studies for a long, long time. So if they want to know what I think about something, they either would have to watch the videos or they would have to talk to me, right? Email me, communicate with me, and talk with me. But all I can do is do what I'm doing. I can't act differently. That is, I have to be thorough. And when I draw the conclusions, when I draw them all together, if people don't know any of the background information of why I'm drawing those conclusions, they can easily just dismiss them. And they can dismiss it because it's too complicated, whatever reason they want to give. But that's what God has given us to do. When we look at what happened with the midnight cry in Millerite history, that was very complicated. It was not an easy thing. They had just figured some things out about calendars and how they worked. But God empowered those people because they were interested in looking for truth. They had been following the papers of, the Midnight Cry and Signs of the Times. And so when the time came, they were able to see that light. But most of those people ended up falling away in the end. And we just have.
Yes, but we wouldn't focus on them. We would focus on the ones that remained because they needed faith in order to figure out what happened. And I think even when we're the 144,000, we're still not going to have it all figured out. We're still going to need faith. It's a constant repeating theme.
Nobody's saying that we don't need faith, but faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So in order for them to have faith, in order for us to have faith, we have to follow what the counsel that Ellen White gave us. And she gives us this counsel very specifically because they followed that counsel. So there's two things. One is they had to come together to study everything out. They had to set aside, basically it's an upper room experience is what they went through. They had to set aside personalities and biases and prejudice, and they had to study together. And when they couldn't agree, they would go separately and pray and study, and then come together when they could agree. And the other thing is, she brings out clearly that if a brother differ with you on some points of faith, you're not supposed to belittle him, you're not supposed to make him to be a heretic, but you need to sit down with him and as a Christian, go over the points, because you don't know if you are correct and he is in error. And this is what I believe that we should do with everyone. That's why I've had Odilio in my studies. That's why I've had Daniel Vanderhorst in my studies. People that, and I've invited Colin to come to my studies and present as well. So hopefully he takes me up on that. But this is what we have to do. It's not, there's not any other option. There is no shortcut. I wish there was, but there isn't. Because
I don't think anybody's looking for a shortcut. I really don't think anyone's looking for a shortcut, but it's a line that is very clear in the topic and the application that is being used for it. And whether or not other things, everything else ties into it, is some people might need to have that, all those connections in order to feel like they can trust it.
Well,
But other people may not need
I
all
think
that.
people want a shortcut. I don't think people want to do the work. That's my view. Now, I could be wrong, but I think when people don't do the work and they don't take the time and they just listen to something that seems to them to be right, that in the end, they're in grave danger, because Ellen White and the Bible clearly give us the counsel of what we are to do. And
Mhm.
so that's my position, and I can't change that.
Oh,
I can't change who I am.
well, Timothy would agree with you that studying to show thyself approved is required.
Yeah, and I can't change what I'm
Absolutely.
doing. I'm not going to just give somebody my opinion without giving the studies. And those studies, these studies here we're doing Friday night. If somebody really wants to know,
Uh,
it's an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, a week. And they could just study those and they're going to get the information that they need. But people need to study on their own as well. So all I can do is do what I'm doing. I can't do anything differently.
I
And
don't want to take
especially
away
when
from
people
other people.
and especially when people are resistant to actually even hearing what I have to say because I'm a jerk, right? So the fact that I'm a jerk is just something I have to live with, right? Because that
Well,
jerkiness that appears that I have, just as a result of my personality, there's no evil in the fact that I sometimes don't say things the right way. I'm not angry. I'm not hating anybody. I'm not opposed to anything. I don't have some kind of, you know, reason why
no,
I'm
but
trying to attack anybody. But people take me that way, and there's nothing I can do about it, right? I can't change how other people perceive me. But these truths, either they're true or they're not. And if they are true, and people ignore light that God is giving this movement through the various individuals. If I was to ignore what God was giving Colin, or God was giving Adilio, or God was giving Stephen, or God was giving Dwight, or God was giving Daniel, then I would be in grave danger because I would be ignoring light that God has given this movement. He leads individuals, there's no doubt, but as a movement, there isn't one individual leading this movement. There is God leading
right.
this movement using all these individuals. And we need to
Yes,
listen
but
to all of them.
Theodore, the point that I mean, I don't want to take time away, and I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I really appreciate you taking the time to say all those things, and I'm not disagreeing with them, but I'll just go back to my basic need or requirement is, if you're so certain it's not going to be Trump, please explain how that's not true. How is it that you're so convicted about that? Because you must have some reasoning that supports that statement. And it would be very helpful to hear that reasoning rather than just the conclusion that you yourself have come to.
Exactly, and that's what these studies are. So these studies are presenting all of that reasoning. And
Well, but if you know, when a teacher, you know about this, about writing papers. When a person writes a paper, they're going to say, I'm going to explain to you the history of the Egyptians and why this army did this to that army. And then you go into 500 pages of what happened during that event. And then you conclusion just revisits the first paragraph. So it would be like you're making a statement,
well, that's what I did
and
right
it
at
would
the
be
very
really,
beginning. So that's what I did at the beginning.
oh,
So right from
okay.
the
So you're
beginning
talking about,
of this series of studies, I laid out first what we were going to do. In the second study, I explained some of the reasons why Colin was incorrect in
it
his
wasn't
conclusion.
Colin. It wasn't Colin. Anyways,
What do
the
you mean
thing
it's
is,
not Colin?
okay, well, that's something else. But
No,
I have not heard what your reasoning is for saying flat out it's not going to be Donald Trump. Please explain without taking, like, we only have until November. That's only a few months away, right? So, I mean, you must have a pivotal point of reasoning, a
yes.
statement, even that
Well, I went
sounds really
through
good.
that in earlier studies. So the basic principle is that Colin's wrong about Alexander and applying him to Trump.
That doesn't come into it at all, from my understanding. Alexander doesn't come into this at all. It's all about worship. It's not about the kingdoms, not the historical kingdoms of Daniel 2.
Right, because he said,
But because
Can
it
I
is,
say something?
yeah,
Okay, when you did the same one, except you did it, you went into history and found they did it with the popes.
mm-hmm.
They did not bring Greece into it. It was all about the popes. This is all about the president. So I
Mm.
don't understand why you can't understand that.
Okay.
Like if that was right, why is this not right? I don't understand.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. So I'm not sure what you mean. So,
what she's saying is that this, I think it was Tess and Parminder, whoever did a study on the popes, right?
yeah,
But Greece didn't come into it.
I
Like,
understand.
or maybe you did it.
But
Okay,
I
yeah.
understand it's the president's.
Okay, so Greece
So
doesn't come into it.
that's my point, is Greece doesn't come into it.
So, and it doesn't come
That's
into the study.
exactly
So
my main point, is that you can't go, what Colin did is he wanted to say that the mighty king, or a mighty king, so this is Daniel chapter
yeah,
11, right? And
verse
he
2,
says this is
1
Trump, right? And a mighty king shall stand up and shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. So he says that's Trump. But that's not Trump,
yeah.
because
And the reason
Xerxes,
he's saying
yeah,
is the reason he's saying that is because in Daniel chapter 10, verse 21, is the angel is telling Daniel, I'm going to show you specifically this, the I can't remember the exact word, but it's like the applicable, the information that you need to
as
know.
is written in the scriptures of truth. Yeah,
Right. And so this
it's noted
mighty
in the
king is
scripture of truth.
a reference back
Yeah,
to
I understand.
chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, the mighty king that's referenced there. And he has a multitude. I think it's verse 11, whatever. He has a multitude with him. So that's his point. That's what he's saying, is that
I understand this point. It's not a problem of understanding his point. It's just that Trump is typified by Xerxes, right? And Trump stirs up all against the realm of Grecia, correct? And we have in the book of Esther, Trump doing that. That is Xerxes doing that, right? And it's a type of the Sunday law that's going to come in the book of Esther as well. But in chapter 1, you're going to have Trump stirring up everything against Greece, and he's going to lose, right? He's going to be defeated.
chapter 1 of Esther.
Yeah, chapter 1 of Esther and chapter 2 and onward, right? So he's going to come back from that defeat, and he's going to get, after a bit of a time, he's going to get married to Esther, right? So the story of Esther, and then that's going to typify the Sunday law as well, right?
Well, that's not part of, that is not something that Colin has addressed. I'm not familiar with him
I
addressing that.
realize he hasn't addressed it. So this is why we're
So
going
maybe
back into all these histories, because we're saying that the kings of Persia are typifying the presidents of the United States. So that means we have to go back to what the Bible tells us about the kings of Persia.
Well, I think what Daniel chapter 11 is talking about is a sequence of kings up until a mighty king, and then discussing that mighty king
But that
and
mighty,
the context,
that mighty king,
of raffia.
but that mighty king is not the United States. That mighty king is Greece. Because Greece is going to come
Okay,
in.
that's what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, because Greece defeats Persia. So you can't have,
Of course,
can't have the
historically,
United
yes, but
States
that's
be Greece
okay.
unless
So,
they're
okay, now I understand where you differ with
Yeah.
this. You're saying that the mighty king is not Donald Trump, it's Alexander of Greece. Okay, so that is something I
That's
think that Colin
historically.
has.
So that means that Persia gets conquered
I know.
by Greece, right?
I know,
United States
historically,
gets conquered
absolutely.
by United States gets conquered by Greece.
Yeah, absolutely. And who was the president when that happened? Trump was defeated by Biden.
Right, exactly. So that's
Right.
my so
Trump was the
can't
mighty
be,
king.
but then he
Trump
can't
was the
because
mighty king
but it doesn't
who
say
had a
the mighty
multitude.
king. It's a mighty king shall
And that was referenced as the Battle of Raffia. And then a few verses later is the Battle of Panium, where he comes back.
But that's not what it says here. So if you're going to go by the scriptures, you can't make the mighty king be Trump, because it's a mighty. We can't do that.
So I understand now where the difference of understanding is occurring.
Well, that's one of them, right? But based on what the Bible says, Persia gets conquered by Greece. When it gets conquered by Greece, that's the end of Persia, right? And that's why it goes from Xerxes to Alexander. It doesn't go through all of the other kings
of course
of
it
Persia.
does. But we're not talking about history. It's not talking about that. It's not the history of the wars of the succession of kings, of kingdoms. It's in the context of worship. So I think there has to be some more clarification regarding
Well, I'm not going to.
how does.
Yes, that's what
how
I'm
does the
doing.
movie-
So that's what I'm doing now. So all of these studies are a clarification of all of this, right?
It's not
So-
talking about that at all.
But
What
it's
you're talking about is not talking about that at all.
not true. No, because all of this is connected. If we don't understand the whole picture, we can't look at some detail and just understand what it means. You have to look at
Well, I
the
think
whole picture.
the
I
Bible's,
cannot. I cannot believe something unless I can see the whole picture.
I understand that, and that's
Right?
valuable.
That's why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist and not something else.
Mm.
Because I study and I bring together everything in the Bible. I don't just take some verse that says, they shall be tormented forever and ever, and say, well, that means that, they're going to be tormented forever and ever, right? I can't do that.
Yes.
To follow Miller's rules.
No.
That is, Miller says we
Got
have to bring together everything, and that's what we're doing. So I'm following Miller's
But
rules.
then why does the angel at the end of chapter 10 say, I will show you that which is noted?
Right.
Like,
and that's why
it's not everything. The angel does not say, I'm going to show you everything. He says, I'm going to show you that which is noted.
And that's what we're looking at, what's noted in the scripture of truth. That's everything that's written in the Bible. That's what
I'm not sure that
means.
my understanding of that which is noted is the mountaintops,
No,
not everything.
no. That's what would be your basis for drawing that conclusion?
Just the way the angel said to Daniel, that I'm going to show you that which is noted, the notable things, the things that you have to pay attention to in the scripture of truth.
It just
That
means
which is noted.
all it means is
Why
something
didn't he
that's
just
written down.
show you this?
Noted.
Why didn't he just say?
You're doing. You're making a mistake in taking an English word and applying a different meaning than the word means. It just means a record. So what's in the record in the scriptures? It doesn't mean the mountaintops. It doesn't mean something that's noteworthy. They could have said in the record in the scripture of truth, because that's what the word means. It doesn't mean what you're saying it means. That's equivocation. So you have to use.
Well, I'm willing to see your point. I'm definitely willing to see your point.
Yeah.
But I'm just recognizing from the outside looking in that the light that Colin has been given, that he is sharing, is showing that the mighty king is of that one verse 11 of chapter 11,
Verse
is the
3 of
same mighty
chapter 11. Or you're saying all the way over to chapter 11, the king of the north here. So one of the things we have to do.
King of the south.
Yeah, the king of the south and the king of the north. So one of the things we have to do in this study is we do have to come back to chapter 11 of Daniel and understand this chapter differently than we have.
I think that is the point that needs clarification now, not all these other spans of times and, all these other timelines and, all those other numbers, Theodore.
Okay.
Because this is the point of contention that needs to be addressed. And right now, it's like you're sweeping it under the carpet, and it's like, okay, look at the chair, look at the chimney, look at the TV, look look at everything else, but don't look under the carpet. I
Okay.
want to look under the carpet.
Okay, how am I sweeping it
Because
under the
that's
carpet when I'm addressing what Colin's study is and I'm showing
well,
witnesses
you have.
that his study is correct?
Sorry, I'm so sorry, but I have had to bring you to this point.
What point?
That this is the point where there's difference of understanding, and I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. I'm just saying that we need to, ask God to help us all understand and clarify this understanding,
How does
whatever.
God help us understand?
Pardon me?
How is God going to help us understand?
Well, because
No, just tell me
by
what's the means by which he helps us to understand.
first of all, we need to identify what is it what people understand differently. And why does this person understand it this way? Why does another person understand it a different way? Understand the differences of conclusion. Like, why did you come to this conclusion? Why? I need to understand why I came to this conclusion, the very same as I need to understand why another person came to his conclusion.
Okay.
I need to understand both points of view. It's perspective taking. I need to understand why you believe what you believe, why you got to that conclusion, what were your logical sequence of steps, what was your reasoning from cause to effect, what was Colin's reasoning from cause to effect, and I need to understand my own reasoning from cause to effect, and the scripture of truth should guide us.
And that's
But
what I'm
I
doing.
can't do it.
I don't
know, but
understand why you don't think I'm doing that, because that's exactly what
I'm glad that I'm so happy to hear that, really. And I
But
believe that that is
pretty
what
obvious
you truly believe you are doing.
if you
But
watch
the
the
way that I
studies, it's
learn,
pretty,
but listen,
but I'm
listen,
different than you. I'm not you. So I can't
I know, and I'm,
do for you what you can do for yourself. I can't do that. All I can do is be me. And me is
yeah,
going through things thoroughly. And I can't be
yeah.
somebody else. I've tried. I
Mhm.
can't do it. I'm only me. This is
Don't
just
try to do that, be yourself. But
right.
the way that you learn, Theodore, is by looking at the trees. The way that I learn is by looking at the forest, and a few trees in the forest, but not all the trees.
Well,
I just need to see the
actually, I'm a forest guy. The only thing that has made me look at all these details is that I care about being accurate. So all of this is against, in a certain sense, my nature. That is, I'm not a detail person. I'm a broad, sweeping brush person. As an
So
artist,
why
I was an
are
impressionistic
you
artist.
being so
I was
detailed? Why
not
are
a
you being
realistic artist. Why? Because this is what
okay?
God's telling us to do. I'm just doing what God tells me to do. I don't,
Where is God telling you? How is God telling you to do that?
because this is what He's been showing us all along. So
Okay,
back in
okay.
2013, I was, for lack of a better word, possessed in looking at these dates. I had to solve the problem of the 2520, the chronology of the
I
20,
know, I remember.
and the prophetic periods. It's not something I chose to do. These are things that I was compelled to do. And
I know.
I couldn't stop it. So all through this whole time, all I've been doing is doing what God tells me to do. And when I look at Colin's study, I can see that God's leading him. When I look at Adilio's studies, I can see God's leading him. God's leading Stephen.
Right.
God's leading Dwight.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm not rejecting any of God's leading in these individuals.
Let me ask you
What
this.
I do know, let me finish. So
Okay.
what I believe
Sure.
is that each of us are given a different piece of the puzzle. And in order to see the picture, we have to bring all of the pieces together. Not one person has all of the light that we need as a movement. God is clearly showing that this movement has to come to the upper room. In order for us to accomplish the task that God wants to give us, we need to be truly converted and reconciled to one another and fully supportive of one another. And
in the
this
upper
is what I've
room,
been doing the whole time. But people accuse me.
in the upper room.
Yeah.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
What in the upper room, was there any misrepresentation? Did one disciple misrepresent what another disciple said?
No. So
or
that's
was
why
trying
we
to
shouldn't
convey?
misrepresent what people say.
And let me ask you this, Theodore.
Yeah.
Was God leading you to put up an email from Colin as if it was the very first
Okay.
salvo between the two of you? Or was there an email from you prior to
Colin
that
and I have already resolved that. So
saying
Colin
that
and I
his
have already
prediction.
resolved that. That was a misunderstanding. That was a misunderstanding. So Colin misunderstood what I was doing and what I was asking. And
Well, I'd like to hear him say that,
yeah, well, he'll tell you. He'll tell you tomorrow.
because I don't think God would lead anybody to misrepresent what another person is saying by putting up an email and saying that he emailed me first, when clearly he was responding to your email.
Okay, so
So that was a
I went through this with
misrepresentation.
Colin on Sunday night. We went through I went through my presentation, and at first I didn't know what he was talking about. But then when I went
Oh.
through it, I saw what he was, because I'm not a detailed person, I left out some information, but that wasn't to misrepresent. I don't even know how that's a
I
misrepresentation.
thought you said you weren't a detailed person.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not a detailed person. I'm
Okay.
a broad brush person. So when I presented it, I left out information that I didn't think was very important, right? That is, all I was bringing up is that Colin had been at my study, and now I'm getting this email. I never explained about the fact that we had an email exchange in there. To me, it wasn't important.
No, you didn't.
Right.
But you
it
had been
wasn't
at his
important.
study,
But it wasn't
but you did
important.
portray his email as the initial email, which it wasn't, and that didn't make a difference.
But to me, that didn't really matter, right?
Oh, really?
And also, Iran says it was discussed before the start of the meeting, which I didn't realize that it wasn't recorded. But this is the point. So when I was presenting, I just didn't think it was an important detail. Now, Colin did, because he thought it was a misrepresentation of something. But it took me a while to figure out why it mattered to him, because to me, it wouldn't even really matter, right? So there was no, I wasn't trying to misrepresent what was being said. I was just
Understood.
I was just presenting things in a simple way, leaving out some details. And the other thing that he thought that I had asked a question, something to the effect, is it fair for him to send me this email? And the question I was actually asking, was it fair for me to look at this email and read it? I was actually questioning my fairness, not his fairness. And when I said that, Dwight said something to the fact, absolutely not, because Dwight understood it in the same way that Colin did, right? He thought that I was questioning the fairness of sending me this email, which I wasn't.
Yes.
I was questioning the fairness of me examining the email.
That's a very important point to straighten out. Thank you.
Me and Colin straightened it out. So that was, so nothing. One thing I will not do that I find abhorrent is to misrepresent an argument. When I look at an argument, even when I'm presenting my own argument, I want to look at all the weaknesses of what I'm saying. And if I'm looking at another person's argument, what people will often do, they look at somebody else's position on a point, is they will look at the weakest parts of an argument and ignore the strong parts, because what they're trying to do is tear down what somebody else is doing. That is, they're in a dialogical environment. And
I understand. And that is not what God wants us to do. We are to look for truth, not look to tear down, and to look for truth. So that is an important precedent to set within each of ourselves, to look for truth first and foremost in the perspective of the other person, not to look for this point is wrong, that point is wrong, etc. That's a debating spirit.
Right, which I never have, right? That is, I can't actually do that. It's against my nature to get into a debate and try to tear down somebody's argument. So when I was discussing with Colin on all the studies that I've been in regarding the presidents of the United States, what I was presenting was my support for what he was saying. That is, I saw that God had given him this information, and I saw this was really important that we understood it. But there were some questions that I wanted to have at that time so that I could understand fully, because I could see right away, as soon as I came into the study, I didn't actually have to listen to much to see the sensibleness of what he was saying. But I had reasons why, and there's still other reasons, but those reasons I have to explain. That is, I can't just tell you why. That is, I know.
Well, you did just say flat out, it won't be Trump. And people are shocked as to how you can say that without actually backing it up in a
But that's why
salient
I'm having
way.
the studies Friday night. So
I
this is my
understand.
point.
I
So
understand.
you're saying that
Yeah.
I should have just said, well, I agree that it's Trump, but
No,
no. So what am I going to
you
say? I'm
should
going to say,
be
hey,
more
this is
honest.
really good, but I just
To be
don't.
Can I
totally
say
honest, you
something?
would say, yeah, but let me finish for a sec. First, Rosanna, please. To be totally honest, I would think you would say something like, I don't agree that it's Trump. I can't explain it right now, but I'm going to try to present as to why I think it's not Trump.
That's
That
what
would be
I'm
being more honest in just saying it's not. Go ahead, please, Rosanna.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was similar, like if you didn't agree it was going to be Trump, then you must have had an idea who it was going to be.
Yeah. And that's what I've been presenting.
Yeah, but I haven't heard it.
But you've been presenting everything but that. You've been talking about thousands of other things except that.
Well, I've actually been quite clear that it's not a person.
Okay, so am I out to lunch? I mean, I have not come to all the studies. Maybe the other people who are listening right now can enlighten me regarding that. Do you guys have clarity on who it's going to be
It's not a who. That's the point.
or what it's
The
going to be?
United States is going to enact a Sunday law, right? We know that. But the 8th is the image of the beast.
Of course it is.
Right. So the
But
8th.
who are the players?
But it doesn't
It's
matter.
not.
Person is not an
There-
important point, and that's why we're going through this process, because I want to show.
Okay,
people.
philosophically, it is the image of the beast. Philosophically,
That's
and
not
in the Bible,
philosophical.
if you want to.
That's not
Well,
philosophical.
it is.
Why are you using the
Then
word?
what is it? It's because
It's a symbol.
people. Okay, symbolically.
What Joseph
Sorry.
Bates said. What Joseph Bates said is that the 8th head is the image of the beast. That it's the 8th head is because originally the pioneers had the heads to be the different forms of Roman government.
Okay. Okay.
Joseph
Can I
Bates
ask you this
looks at
Peter?
Joseph Bates look at Revelation 13 as exactly the same as Revelation 17, but in a different symbol. That is, Revelation 13 shows two different beasts, but in Revelation 17, we're seeing this woman riding the one beast, and then we see the 8th head, and that 8th head is that same image of the beast that's made by the United States in chapter 13.
But it has to be, okay, so I think I've heard you say that Biden, because he's a puppet, it's not just him, but he's a conduit through which the globalists, the United Nations, the spiritualists, the dragon power is speaking, representing the King of the North, yes?
King of the South, yes.
I mean, sorry, King of the South.
Mhm.
So our symbol for that is Biden.
That's fine.
So the image of the beast is the King of the North, combining like the apostate Protestants of the United States, combining with the papal power to enact a religious decree.
Mhm.
And who is our symbol for that? That is Trump. That is what Colin is saying. That is what my understanding is.
Trump can be a symbol for it, but what I'm trying to say is that in the 8th, you don't need the person of Trump. You need what Trump symbolizes.
Well, we know that. We know it's the image of the beast. We know that.
But he's
But
saying that
who
Trump actually has to
symbolizes?
get reelected for this to happen. And I'm saying that it doesn't have to.
In order to pass an executive order, somebody has to be in charge.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be Trump. And actually, it can't be Trump.
Because
Trump.
because he's not.
Because when it comes to the symbol of the 8th, it can't be the same person. That is the point. Even though it says it's of the 7, it's not talking about a person. And this is what we have to illustrate. That the 8th
What is
is
it?
not symbolizing one of the persons who becomes the 8th. That's kind of
It's
the
talking
point.
about a king. It's talking about a king power. A
Right.
king is a kingdom.
But it's
Whatever, I mean, Trump could
symbol.
be the kingdom. But
But it's a symbol.
if it is a resurrection of one of the previous 7 kingly powers.
Powers, but not person.
Well, okay, but who symbolizes that power, Theodore?
You don't, what do you mean, who?
Who's going to sign his name to the executive order that passes the Sunday law?
It doesn't matter who. The prophecy's not going to tell us the name of that
I'll
person.
tell you who it matters to. It matters to people like me who go by, wow, look at this, Biden's the president now. Oh, there's going to be another election on November 8th. Oh, look, Trump is in the running. I wonder if it could be Trump that comes out.
Well,
Trump, we know
not
already
running for the election on
friendship
November
with
8th. He has to wait till 2024, but it's
No, he can't. I know, I understand, but there is a mechanism whereby he could go into power, and I'm not going to get into all that.
I know the
Americans,
theory behind it, but I
there you go.
that, yeah.
So don't say 2024. It could happen as soon as January 2023. It could happen quickly.
Yeah, but I'm
Right?
saying it won't.
Yeah. And don't resist the idea that Trump could be
Not
the
a matter of
symbolic,
resisting the idea. What makes you think I'm resistant to an idea?
because you're saying it's not Trump. You're saying it can
Because
be
we
him.
have reasons why it's not Trump, and those reasons
But
exist.
what
Those
are
the reasons
they?
I'm presenting.
What are they?
Well, one
You've
is
told me the image
eighth,
of the beast.
because when the 8th arises, he's never the same person.
But the
as one
8th,
of the
it
7.
says in Revelation 17, it's of the 7.
Right. But
How
that
can,
doesn't mean one
how
of
are you
the
reading
7.
that?
It
That's
means,
one of the 7.
no. Why are you adding the word one there?
Well, is of the 7.
Yeah.
The 8th.
He's of.
The 8th is a,
He's
yeah.
of the 7. He's not one of the 7.
But they're being numbered ordinally, cardinally, however you want to put it with your number systems. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. There, and it says the 8th is of the 7.
Right. So you need to understand
How
what
do you take
the
that?
7 means.
I mean, you have to explain how you interpret that then, Theodore, because everyone else
The
on
way
planet
that I
Earth
interpret it is
would say that the
I go back to all the other 7s and then the 8ths. Because we have a pattern in scripture. If I'm just going to take my understanding and apply it to a scripture, then
Revelation 17, you told me yourself, is talking about the beast and the woman riding the beast. The beast is a kingdom.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. And the woman is the church.
Yeah.
And that's the image of the beast. Now, the church is always referred to as female, et cetera, all that. I'm not doing a presentation here, but that is very clearly talking about the image of the beast. And you'll have to explain your reasoning as to how the 8th is never of the 7.
I never said the 8th is not of the 7. It is of the 7.
Well, obviously, yeah, you're confusing me. And I think you're confusing many people by saying these things because people have an understanding that the 8th is a resurrection. We've talked about that. Jeff has presented that. No one has argued with
Jesus
that.
the 8th of the 7 kings.
What?
When we look at the last 7 kings of Judah, Zedekiah is the 7th.
I don't know.
He's taken over by, according to Ellen White, when Zedekiah is killed, Babylon takes over, and then she says, well, because she's interpreting the Bible, I will overturn it until he come whose right it is. And that is in Babylon, it's overturned to Medo-Persia, it's overturned to Greece, and it's overturned to Rome. And Christ then is the 8th, because he's of the 7. Of the 7 does not mean one of the 7, and I don't know why we would think it does mean one of the 7, because that's not what it means. When I say,
then you'll have to have a presentation about that.
But I have done that. We already did
Excuse
it.
me?
Yeah.
When you use that same riddle for chapter 2, you bring Rome in. Rome is the one that was brought in for the 8.
Which is of the 7, right?
Yes.
And there's other lines also that Colin has brought out that show
I'm
that
not
the
bringing
8th
Rome
is of
into
the
it.
7.
So it's overturned from Babylon. Babylon takes the kingship away from Judah, right? It's overturned to Greece, or to Persia, then to Greece, then to Rome, and then he comes, whose right it
Yeah,
is.
whose right it is.
So
Hosea
Jesus
chapter
is the
6,
eighth.
verse
Rome
2.
is not the
Yep.
eighth.
Mhm.
Jesus is the eighth, right?
Yeah.
He's of the seven. Can we agree with that? That he's of the seven? In order for him to be the eighth, he has to be of the seven.
Well, Theodore, yes, but now you're using the logic for that scripture that you're negating in Revelation chapter 17.
No, because Jesus isn't one of the kings of Judah. He's not one of the seven kings. He's of the seven. What does that mean? He's a descendant.
So you're making an application of Ezekiel chapter, whatever chapter that is in Ezekiel. You're making a chapter of an application of that to Revelation 17.
Because it's a pattern of the seven and the eighth. And
Then
I
do
do
that,
with
because
all of
this
the
is
patterns of the sevens and the eights given in
That's
Scripture.
another different pattern though. You should do
How's
one of that.
Explain how it's a different pattern.
okay. It's different because that is talking about the kingdom of Christ. That is not talking about the kingdoms of the world.
Yeah, but we know
That's totally different.
that they're counterfeit of Christ.
Okay, a counterfeit does not mean that Jesus is part of both of them. A counterfeit is a complete counterfeit. Someone else is going to come back as Jesus Christ. It's not Donald Trump, but he's going to be riding the beast or the papacy. He's going to be riding his system. That is going to be the Pope. That is going to be Satan, who is the counterfeit of Jesus Christ in that chapter of Ezekiel that you're talking about. Jesus Christ is not in Revelation 17 as the eighth. Nobody is saying that.
No,
That is the
I'm not saying
counterfeit.
that. I'm not saying that either. Why would you? When you look at
Because you just told me that the eighth in Revelation 17 can't be as the seven because it's not Jesus Christ.
No, I did not.
Because
say
you said
that. What I said.
Yeah.
Here's what I said.
So
Jesus Christ is the eighth. He's of the seven kings of Judah, right? So what does that mean? If I apply this riddle to Christ, and I say that here we have a pattern of seven, and this pattern we're actually using, it's one of the basis. It's actually the first thing that Jeff found regarding seven kings was the kings of Judah, right?
yes, but Theodore, those are historical kings, and you're mixing up historical kings written in history.
Okay, Bonnie, I'm not
with
mixing up.
Ezekiel.
I'm using the pattern. So Jeff did the same.
I know.
Okay.
Yes, I understand. You're using the pattern, but
So
in
I would
whatever
say
chapter that
I'm
is of
mixing up
Ezekiel,
historical kings.
Would this be an anti?
because
What's that? An anchor?
Anti.
Oh, an
Anti-type.
Well, this would be a type. So Christ is a type. The beast of Revelation is a counterfeit, right? We can agree that the papacy is a counterfeit. It has its own 2520, for instance, and Christ has his 2520, right? The true 2520 is the week of Christ, right? So what we see here is we see that we have all of these examples which Jeff initially used. That is, Jeff used the kings of Judah first. That was 2013 when he was dealing with the first seven times. And then he looked at the kings of Persia. And then he looked at the last kings of northern Israel. And all of these he had the sevens. But he didn't realize that in all of these you also have the eighth. And the eighth is of the seven. What that means is it's a descendant. It doesn't mean it's one of the seven.
So where is that in Scripture, Theodore?
Where it says he's of the seven. It doesn't say he's
in
one
chapter
of the
17.
Yeah, it doesn't say he's one of the seven, right? It says
So you're saying Rehoboam. You're saying Jeroboam was a descendant of who? He was like a servant. He wasn't even a descendant. Like, which king are you talking about?
We're talking about the last seven kings of Judah. Jesus is in the line of the son of David, right? He's of the seven. When he comes, whose right it is, he comes because he comes from the line of the kings of Judah, right?
Well, absolutely. Yes.
But that king of Judah, the last king, Zedekiah, he's going to have his kingdom taken away from him. And it's going to go to Babylon, and then it's going to go to Medo Persia, then it's going to go to Greece, then it's going to go to Rome. And then Christ comes, and he's the 8th. Right?
Fine.
We're going to
Yes.
look at this.
Fine.
Now, that's what Revelation 17 is showing, is that this counterfeit is following the same pattern that's given with Christ.
Right.
So
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. It's not mixing anything up. It's just showing that
It is, because follow it through. It is mixing it up. No, you're mixing it up, and I'll tell you how. Because that is a counterfeit in Revelation 17. So the 8th is not going to be Jesus Christ.
I know. I'm not saying the 8th is Jesus Christ. That's the point.
So the 8th is a descendant of the Roman power that came before, right?
Right. Yeah.
Basically, what your argument is that the 8th is a descendant of the 7, not one of the 7.
That's the argument, yes. Because it doesn't say.
Then why didn't you make that clear before? Why didn't you make that clear?
Because I have made it clear before.
To who?
In the studies that we're
This is
doing
the
on
first time I've
Friday
heard
night. I mean,
Okay.
you're telling me that I have to bring every point in the few minutes that I had to talk in the studies that Collins did, that I'm somehow supposed to present what I understand. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say, right?
No, it's okay. Sir. I understand. It's all right. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good.
But you need to have these conversations with people. You need to have these conversations so that people can understand exactly what you mean.
Okay.
Now it's becoming clear to me that you believe what, I'm not going to reiterate, right? But it is something different than what we have always understood in the past.
No.
It is something different. Yes, it is.
That's the point.
It is something different. Yeah. Okay. All right.
There are some details. There are some details that are different, but these details come from using line upon line. That is, all we have done is we've gone to the past to understand the present.
Don't worry about it. I understand that. But the thing is, now you're saying that it's not going to be a person, it's going to be an entity. How is that entity a descendant of the previous 7?
Okay, so when we look at all these kingdoms, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome pagan, Rome papal, and we have an image to the beast, is the image to the beast similar to the beast? Is it of the beast?
Well, I think I'm getting mixed up with your historical outline sequence that you just mentioned, and what's in Revelation 17 is a prophetic. It's not historical, it's prophetic, and it's talking about specifically, it's talking about those kingdoms, and then the dragon, it's the threefold union, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, and then the 8th. The 8th is what? You're saying it's an entity. I'm asking you, how is that entity a descendant of those 7 previous?
I never used it as an entity. I said it's not.
Well, you said it wasn't a person. What is it? If it's not a person, what is it?
It's the
image of the beast.
It's the threefold union coming together. It's the image of the beast.
Very good. And I'm saying, how is that Sunday law going to be passed by the image of the beast? How is it going to be passed?
Well, we already know
How is it going to be?
White says about it. It's going to be through the United States, through their legislation.
And who's going to legislate it? Who's going to write the directive, the executive order?
Well, whoever happens to be the president then, but he's not.
And that's what Colin. But you're saying it's not Trump.
Yeah.
How do you know it's not Trump?
It doesn't have to be Trump. The point is.
Well, that's not what you said before.
Yes, it is. That's what I actually said initially. Now I believe it's.
You said it.
No, just finish. Let me finish. You're asking me questions.
Okay.
So first off,
I'm just clarifying.
But so first off, it doesn't have to be Trump. And Colin, if he thought about it, would recognize that it doesn't. But I'm saying it's not going to be Trump. And the reason is, when we look at every single other example of the 7 and the 8, the 8th is never one of the kings. We don't have a resurrection of a person that's going to be the same person. Even if you deal with the papacy, You don't have to have Pope Pius VI come again into power, right? You would agree with me there. Nobody would say,
Well, of course,
right,
okay. Nobody's saying that
No,
either.
I shouldn't say nobody's saying it, because there are some people who believe that, you're going to have a resurrection of Pope John Paul II. But
Well, we're not talking about those.
right, but the
people who
point is, we don't ever make the argument anywhere else that it has to be the same person. We always understood that it's the same power, and that power is Republican America.
Yes, of course, Theodore, but who
person himself-
symbolizes that?
The person
Who's the
himself
symbol?
is immaterial in the argument. It
It's
doesn't.
not immaterial if you live in the real world. It's not, because this election coming up is Biden will be either reelected or, I mean, like the Democrats will either lose the House and the Senate or they won't.
Yeah,
Biden will remain
they'll
in
probably
power
lose it.
or he won't.
I
So
think
it
they're
does
going to
come
lose
down
it.
to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
See,
does.
I agree.
Yeah.
The Democrats are going to lose the House. They're going to be in power, right? And it's going to be Republican America that's going to, in response to all the crazy things that have been happening in this world, that are going to bring in the sun. Okay. We have to have a paneum, and I think that all the evidence that I brought shows that this midterm election is connected to this paneum, right? So
the 46 and the 19 and the King of the South and the King of the North on that chart that's on our screens right now shows us paneum, yes.
Yeah, and I've accepted that. So I did some chronology and just said this is correct. What Colin put here is correct. Raffia and paneum. This fits the bill. We already have the date there. We can show that it's witnessed by an analysis of the spans of time and the symbols that are there. So we can't ignore it. I did that last week, and I said we can't ignore this. But but there is
let me ask you this question.
There is no reason to say that it has to be the person of Trump that does this, right? There's nothing in the prophecy that requires.
I'll bring you a reason.
Donald Trump. Okay, what's the reason?
I'll give you a reason.
Okay.
What happened? What is it that resurrects those dull, dead, dry bones in Ezekiel 37?
Well, it's prophecy.
That's right.
Yeah.
God's people have to prophesy again. We are to prophesy again. It is important that we know ahead of time what is going to happen, not when, but what, to the nth degree of detail that we can ascertain. And right now, to me, it's crystal clear that no matter how we argue this, that there is going to be a turnover of power. There is going to be a paneum as we understand it.
Yeah.
The King of the North, as symbolized by Donald Trump, or it could be someone else. Maybe it's some Joe Blow guy in the Republican Party who's going to be then appointed as president, as Speaker of the House and as president, and he's going to sign the executive order. And it is of the 7 because he's in the Republican Party, and the Republican Party was part of the 7.
And this was the point that I made from understanding, even though the Millerites had a different interpretation of Revelation 17, it became very clear that to be of the 7 doesn't mean to be necessarily one of the 7. And actually, that's not how you would say he's one of the 7. You wouldn't say he's of the 7. But there's still lots more reasons. So, and that's what I've
if you're casting doubt,
study. So some of them I have done already. Some of them we still haven't looked at. I've talked about them or touched on them, but we need to look at them in detail, because there's no point. Nobody's going to just listen to me. I'm nobody. So, and I wouldn't expect that people should just accept what I say. Even in the Colin study, I'm not saying, well, I say it's not going to be Trump and everybody should just agree with me. There was no sense ever in my word or my actions or my thoughts that somehow, that if people don't agree with me about something I didn't even give all the support for, that somehow, that's, they're wrong. They just have to accept it. Never would I suggest such a thing. So what I did is I began a series of studies, and those series of studies are laying out point by point in a methodical way to go through all of the different understandings that we have in the past and in the present in this movement. And as we move towards covering everything, then we should be able to come to some kind of conclusion. My main point is that no one person has all of the truth, and I would not expect that I understand everything. And so we need this movement to come together. We need this movement to study these things together in the Spirit of Christ. Right? We need to listen to one another. And we shouldn't be attacking people's character based upon the fact that somebody like me can be a bit of a jerk when it comes to how I communicate. Right? So yeah, sometimes I regret what I
Leave yourself open to be taken the wrong way many times because you're
yes.
not, you haven't practiced being extremely clear and in expressing. And I'm not saying you have to say you're a jerk. I don't agree with
To say
that.
that I haven't practiced.
That actually
Okay, Bonnie,
is misleading.
I have practiced my entire life. That
I
is
believe it.
of trying to be as clear as possible. So to say that I haven't practiced, that's all I do. That's all I think about. When it comes to teaching, because that's what I am as a teacher, right? I teach guitar, I teach music theory. All my whole life, it's been trying to communicate to people in a clear way, trying to communicate with my dad, who was a little muddled up because he had Asperger's, right? Impossible to communicate. Listening to people, trying to understand where they're coming from. But I still am always going to put my foot in my mouth, because no matter how many times, no matter how much work I do, I can't see the world exactly the way other people see it. Now, I believe there's also God's providence in some of the things that have happened negatively. So I'm not trying to say that I'm not to blame, but I'm saying that sometimes these things that happen, God foresaw these things. He knows my intentions. He knows what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to bring everyone together. I really think that we have to study together. And people won't talk to me. I mean, there's people in this movement who will not answer emails and who will not answer the phone. They will not talk to me.
Theodore, have you ever heard this expression? And I'm not saying this applies to you. I'm not saying this defines you, okay? But have you ever heard this? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. But how am I going to make them know I care?
So from the outside looking in, and this I believe is why not only Huey, many people had this reaction to your statement during Colin's presentation.
Yeah.
My question to you would be, how can I say to you, how can I bring this to your attention? What can I say as a trigger, or like as a sign, as a clue, as a, I don't know, as a not an alarm, but some like a little tweak? Like, what can I say that would let you know that you're being offensive
Nothing you can
without
do.
actually accusing you? Pardon me?
There's nothing you can do.
No, there is.
I think a simpler solution is people should just know that sometimes and people know this about me. They know I'm didactic and pedantic, right?
Yes, but Theodore, please
But that's who I
continue,
am.
because
Well,
you're
just going to have to accept me as I am. And if you can't accept me as I am, then there's nothing I can do about it. Right?
I do accept you as you are, and that is why I am asking you this question, because people get hurt, people get offended, because I am who I am. Roseanne is who she is.
Right.
Dwight is who he is.
Right.
We're not all like you or like each other.
Exactly.
Therefore, there is a tendency for you to be offensive without meaning it.
Yeah,
so in love, I want to help you. I want to give you I don't know, I have to come up with the right word.
Okay.
But what can I say in love to let you know you're hurting someone's feelings, you're offending somebody?
But okay, here's what people
without actually.
If people feel that they're hurt by me, they need to follow the counsel of the scriptures. They need to go to me and have communication with me about it. Right? Isn't that what needs to happen? Because look, I've lived with
You know
this
what,
my entire
Theodore?
life.
I
I-
believe,
listen.
I think that you could change your perspective. You could take the other person's perspective. You're
Oh, I do.
capable of doing that.
I do. I take the
But
other person's
you
perspective.
get locked into your corner and you make these didactic statements, which if you could just take a brush and erase that chalkboard in the moment, that would be healing. And that is what Christ did. He healed these moments that hurt people. When someone is doing a presentation and their mind is focused on teaching and doing all of this, and then they get unseated, they get kind of just swept off with whatever they're doing. They're just, it's like, they can't say, oh, I have to just accept Theodore as he is and let him,
Why can't they?
No, I think that what you could do with someone who loves you and cares about, because they know that you don't intend to do that. You have a point to make. You're justified in.
So then they know that they shouldn't be hurt by it.
No, you need to present that. You need to say, look, I don't mean to hurt you.
That's what
But
I
here's
do.
my point of view.
I do.
No, you didn't.
In that
didn't.
situation, I didn't. So in that situation,
Exactly.
I recognize there are
Exactly.
moments. So Bonnie, I've lived with this my whole life, right? I've lived with myself my whole
I know
life.
you did.
So
I know you did. And I think by being in that church.
Yeah. So listen, 99.9% of the time, I do it right. 99.9% of the time, right?
And who is your coach? Who's your coach? Who helps you in those tricky moments? Do you have a
Heidi
coach?
helps me. God helps me.
Good.
I help me. I analyze every time I have a bad interaction with somebody. I think about that for weeks.
Yeah.
Think about
Of
how I can
course.
do it differently next time, right?
And guess what? Satan wants to trip you up all the time. And I want to overcome the enemy. I don't want there to be this damage.
Right.
I want to nip it in the bud. And I want you to be able to take a healing tack immediately. And the devil has to leave.
And I did that
because
in other situations. I actually apologized right away in some of the situations that I was in. I've apologized quite a few times, probably 3 or 4 times in the studies.
Okay. It's
right?
more important to do it immediately. As soon as you recognize it. As soon as there's animosity towards you, bam, you should be looking at yourself. What did I do? Did I trigger this? And if you have a coach who's a detached observer who can say, oh, you need to just
Okay.
say, I'm
So
sorry.
Bonnie, no matter
Okay.
what, because of who I am as a person, I know that there are going to be times and that's why I don't like doing any of this, right? I'm an introvert. I'd rather just spend my time writing some papers because in a paper, I can weigh my words and I can write all that stuff that I need to make sure that the person reading isn't going to think I'm a jerk. But you know what? Sometimes when I'm the most careful, people get the most upset. And that's because I can't perceive how people are going to take something I'm doing. And it takes me a while to process what's actually going on.
Right.
Now,
I understand.
Right? So I apologized and don't say that I didn't, because I did apologize for all of the situations where I've had problems. I've contacted some people and apologized personally to them, right? Which I think is often much better. Some people have not accepted any of my apologies. Instead, they give a bunch of accusations, false accusations about who I am as a person, what I'm planning to do, that I'm some deceptive person, that I'm trying to undermine the truth, that I'm a Jesuit.
And don't give them the time. Don't give the devil time for them to form those opinions. If you can nip it in the bud.
I am who I am. So when I'm going to interact, there's just.
So does the devil, Theodore. The devil knows how he can use you.
Bonnie,
the devil knows.
Okay.
Sorry, that's if you want to take it that far.
I understand this, but this is what I'm trying to say is I am trying to follow God. I'm trying to listen to his voice. I'm being very careful. Some of those situations, I spent a great deal in time in prayer before I even went on the Canadian group to talk, and was very careful in my. But people still responded as if, like, to me, I couldn't even understand why people responded the way they did. That was the thing that surprised me and caught me off guard. When Daniel Fontenot, accused me of being a Judas, I mean, I was just totally shocked. Now, I knew that he was resistant to me. I didn't know why. He thought that I'm somehow don't believe in the Jesuit conspiracy or something. But I was very, very surprised. I was very surprised when Huey stepped in, because I thought Colin and I were having a good discussion. And to me, it just didn't make sense for me not to be asking Colin these questions. So what you're doing is you put the whole onus upon me, and I put the onus upon me. So I put the onus upon me to do better next time. I can't change the past. Colin said a bunch of things Saturday night that he shouldn't have said. And I've heard a lot of people say things they shouldn't have said. But there's
That's because you've given them time. You've allowed time to work against you. Yes, you have.
What have I not done that I should have done?
What I'm asking you is, what can a person say? What magic word can a person say that would twig you to the fact that this person knows who you are, accepts you who you are, but is alerting you you're crossing a line. You're offending somebody here. And
but I'm
the other people
going to offend people who want to be offended. So some people are offended for no reason whatsoever. They imagine things about me. Daniel Fontenot was offended with me because he imagined.
You're being defensive.
What? There's nothing wrong with
being defensive.
There's nothing wrong with being defensive, is there?
You're making excuses.
No, not making excuses.
You're in denial.
Well, then.
Sorry, I'm trying to help you in a loving way.
Say you're not.
And I'm letting you know.
No, I understand.
No, Theodore, I'm letting you.
Bonnie, you're being completely unfair in your assessment of the situation. I am doing everything I can to communicate with other people, to be kind, to be gentle, to be understanding.
How has it worked, Theodore? You're in your 60s. How has it worked so far?
It works for some people. It doesn't work for others. Not
there you go.
It should, going to like.
It needs to work. It needs to work for the people you care about.
It's not possible. It can't. It's not possible. What you're saying is not possible. People.
Then you're denying the power of love. You're denying the power that God gave us to love each other.
Look, I love other people, but it doesn't mean that they're going to love me. No matter what I do, there are some people who are not going to love me. I cannot change other people. I can only change myself. And that's
Theodore,
what
I'm offering. I'm offering a solution, and you are resisting it.
Okay, but you're offering me a solution that I have been working on since I was a child.
And how's it working?
That's what I'm saying, is it doesn't work. It's not going to work.
There you go. Try a different solution.
Okay, what's the different solution I should try then? Okay.
I would really like to be able to say, or just clear my throat or something. And that sends you a message of, I love you, but I can see that this person is being offended. So please take a deep breath. Don't shout. Don't talk fast. Lower your voice and try to say something like, I don't want to be offensive. I just want to convey my point.
Okay.
That is being sensitive. People need to be handled with sensitivity. And sometimes all of us, and people who are married will attest to that our spouse, being the detached observer, is the best person to say, you're getting overworked, you're becoming overwrought, you're becoming offensive.
Overworked, ever. Never got overworked.
Well,
in any of these discussions, I was not overworked. I had no emotion about it. I was just discussing.
No, I heard your voice get elevated. You were breathing heavily. You were
my voice get elevated. Why does my voice get elevated?
And you were speaking quickly, and you were interrupting.
Because you keep interrupting me.
These are the signs.
Bonnie, people were interrupting me and trying to talk over me. Nobody just let me talk.
Why?
You talk over me all the time. Now, part of it is the delay that we have with the internet. So that's going to happen, right? You agree there?
Well, of course, but I'm asking you
And
why.
people can be very
Why would people do that?
and people can be very offensive towards me, but nobody says anything about it. Daniel said I was a Judas. This is even, earlier in the discussion, right? He was resistant to me.
I was there.
Nobody,
I was
nobody,
there.
nobody ended up rebuking Daniel Fontenot for saying I was a Judas. I made no attacks on anybody's character ever. I've never attacked anyone in any of the discussions as a person. I've talked about ideas.
Nobody is saying that you have done that, but what Colin did say is
But
that
people have
shut him
attacked
down
me.
from delivering the message.
Yeah, but people have attacked me. You agree, right?
Well, in that one situation, people tried to stop you from offending Colin.
People have
And
people have mocked me. People have called me all kinds of names.
that's not me. That's not Colin. That's not Heidi.
Colin did
That's not.
Saturday night.
That's not most of us.
Colin said I was being deceptive and subtle, right? You know that. You were there at the study Saturday night. He said I was being deceptive.
Yes, he was referring to the way that you presented that email.
Something. I've never accused people of anything. I've only discussed.
But you do.
So why do people feel
I can shed some light
on me as a person? Why do people feel they can attack me as a person, but they're not held accountable for that? But I can just discuss an idea that differs with somebody, and I now have to see that I've done some great sin. Now, sure, I don't want to offend people, but the thing is, I'm always the one who is asked to say they're sorry. Why is nobody recognizing their fault? Here's an example, Bonnie. I was in a Sabbath school class. I was teaching a Sabbath school class in Warburg Church back in 2004. And well, during the superintendent remarks, this guy had made some things about judging others, and he was talking about the people who judge other people, right? And I was thinking about it. I said, well, we shouldn't really be judgmental about people who judge others, because we may not understand everything about that person, why we consider them judgmental. So anyway,
absolutely,
we did the pastor's study, and I was teaching the Sabbath school lesson, and this guy's wife was there. And all I did is made a comment about, that was a really good study that Don did. I really appreciated it. But I said, we also have to be careful that we're not judgmental about people who we consider to be judgmental. Well, the pastor was there, Kiziak at the time. And when this woman heard me say this, she screamed at me, ran out of the Sabbath school room, slamming the door. And I was totally in shock, because I was supportive of what her husband had said. I wasn't making a criticism or anything about him. I was adding something to what he had said. Now, who do you think the pastor made apologize to who?
Right.
I had to apologize to her. I did nothing wrong at all. Not a single thing.
Okay. I understand that. I see that.
Yeah,
but it's taken in the wrong way.
This happens to
Theodore,
me again. So
Theodore, it's taken.
No, look, I don't want to talk about this anymore, Bonnie, because you're not
taken the wrong way.
Listening. You're not listening to what I'm saying.
People take it the wrong way, right?
Look,
I did listen to you.
No, you haven't.
I'm asking you about
anything that I've said. All you have done.
I did.
Okay, tell me how.
I've said okay, because you were saying that you were just trying to edify the guy who gave the study, and that, and rightly so, saying we shouldn't judge people when they judge others, because we don't know why, upon what parameters they're judging other people. And that's correct. But there's a context. There's a context, and I don't think you're sensitive to it. And it's not something that you do on purpose.
There you go.
It is something.
I agree. I'm not sensitive to that context. It's not part of my universe. So
exactly.
I'm always going to be in a situation where somebody is going to be offended by something that I did, right? You agree with me? That's going to happen.
I do agree. I do agree, because I remember at that one church where you said something after during Sabbath school, and Brother Ralph ran out of the church. He ran to his car. He came back in. He started swearing F word and everything, and he yelled because of something you said.
I read a
And
spirit of
I could
prophecy.
tell that it was the same thing, because you just come by it honestly, Theodore.
I understand that.
Yes, you do.
So
But
that's going to be
yeah.
just the reality I have to live with. And if people want to interact with me, they're going to have to live with that reality too. That sometimes.
So you want everyone else to change,
Yes, I
but
do.
you yourself don't. Okay, but
Yes.
you don't have that
I
same
want
expectation
them
of
to
yourself.
accept me for who I am, because I can't be someone else. I have tried for 60 years, and I can tell you, I can't.
We all have to be someone else.
Yeah, we
We're
can't.
supposed to be perfected.
So what a person needs to do in
Yes,
a
that's
situation,
right.
right? So what a person needs to do in a situation when a brother offends you, what do you do? What does the Bible say to do?
Can we? Yes. Okay. Let's follow that thread of thought, and then we'll go back. Okay.
Yeah.
What does the Bible say
When a
to
brother,
go and talk to that person, to say that person, you offended me? Yeah.
how many people do you think have come to me and talked to me about any of these things?
Well, I'm
You
talking
are
to you.
offended. You are. Okay, so you're the first one.
This is how we bring things to the light, Theodore.
I
And
understand.
love
So
can
that's
overcome that. Please, please.
So then
I
don't
just
you
wanna
see
know.
that the onus is upon the person who is offended, according to the scriptures? The onus is on the person who is offended to go to the person who has offended them and to reconcile with them. The onus is not on the person who has done the offense,
Okay.
right?
Is
That's
that not what Huey did?
I've read
Did
lots.
Huey not do that?
No,
I thought he did make his position clear.
he never came and talked to me. He never contacted me
Okay.
about any of
He
this.
did
No
speak up.
one ever has.
He spoke up. He spoke up during that session. What would you like people to say to you so that you understand that a brother is coming to you?
What I want people to do is, if they're offended by me, is to come and talk to me. I will apologize for the hurt I caused. And if there's something that I've done that hurt somebody, like when I watched Colin study Saturday night, I could see that he was hurting, that I had hurt him. That's why I phoned him up and apologized to him, because I saw he was hurting. But Colin was receptive to that. Many people are not receptive to talking to me. Actually, through my whole life, I have had maybe a handful of people who have been offended, who has come and talked to me and been reconciled with me. And those people that have been offended by me, that are reconciled with me, they're still reconciled with me today. That is, once they were able to accept and tell me, look, I understand who you are as a person, and I'm not going to try to ask you to change who you are as a person. And I'm going to accept your apology. And I'm going to accept that sometimes you say things that make you look like a jerk. So when they do that, then they're accepting me as a person. But when somebody says, look, you just need to change, you need to figure out some way not to have this happen. Well, don't you think that I've thought about this for 60 years? That I've worked on this since I was a child? That my mom has talked to me about it and helped me? That Heidi has helped me? Other people have helped me? I went to counseling for years to try to help me to understand this, how I could interact with others. And I've improved leaps and bounds, as you know, right? I'm much better than I used to be. And Heidi's a big part of it. One is she helps me socially, because interacting with people is very, very difficult for me. And Heidi is like an entering wedge for me. So now I can talk to people, and she can make me feel a little more comfortable. She's kind of like this barrier between me and people. But I'm terrified of having to do what I do. But I do it because God tells me to do it. I would much rather not do any videos or ever speak in public or ever speak in Sabbath school, because that was my nature before. I never talked. I was as quiet as a dormouse when I first became an addict. I didn't talk about anything, because one is I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, right? And it's been hard. So God's put me in these situations of going door to door selling art, going door to door selling fruit, going door to door selling honey, going door to door selling my scripture songs, singing to people, working in a guitar store, teaching, doing all these presentations. So I get better at it. But people are saying, well, look, you hurt somebody this one time. Well, if I hurt someone, maybe what that person should do, instead of responding immediately that they were hurt or offended, is just be quiet for a little while, take a bit of time to think about why it is that I hurt them. And if they really feel that they need to talk to me, then come to talk to me. But when people talk amongst themselves and do the work of the accuser of the brethren, that is, they mock, they belittle, they misrepresent a person's character just because they happen to have a certain type of personality that's easy to criticize. I have one of the easiest sort of personality profiles to criticize. People find it very easy to speak negatively about people like me because I'm socially awkward. I don't have the skills that you guys take for granted. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to this movement. I think it's dangerous. I think it's undermining this movement when people talk about people. There's no reason for it. All we need to do is, if we're offended by someone, is go to them ourselves, not talk amongst it about ourselves and misrepresent that person, and other people get all of these biases about what this person's like.
Yeah.
People are not following the counsels of Scripture. I am. That is, I am praying daily. I'm working hard at this. Heidi helps me with it. God helps me with it. But certain situations have arisen, and I don't believe that I was the one that brought in a satanic spirit in those situations. I don't think I was the one who was creating those situations. I got caught in situations that weren't created by me, where people were trying to find fault. That's my belief. And so to try to put the blame on me that there's something magical I can do, I know who I am, and I know how hard I work at this. And this, how many times I've wanted to give up doing any presentations. I would say hundreds of times in the past 2 years. I've not wanted to go on and do a presentation. But I pray to God, and God gives me the conviction that I still have to do this, no matter how much I hate it, how hard it is on me, how much it wears me out. And I saw Jeff go through the same type of thing, because Jeff actually has a very similar problem. He offends a lot of people. He's offended a lot of people because of how he is. He's a little bit different personality, but he could easily offend people. And this is just the way that he is. When you love him and you understand him and you accept him, you can love covers a multitude of sins. I don't hate anybody. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm not saying that somebody should do something. I'm not demanding anything of anybody. All I'm asking is that people allow me to be myself. And I'm going to continue to be myself until the day I die, because that's who I am. And it's somebody that God loves. And my mom loved me, and she understood me. And there's lots of people who love and understand me. And those are the people that I'm going to interact with. But I'm also being asked by God to continue to present, in spite of the fact that some people might be offended. And this whole study, everything that I'm doing here, is supporting Colin, supporting Odilio, supporting Stephen, supporting Dwight. I'm not attacking any person, even if I might feel that there are some things in their character that I don't like. If I'm going to ever address it with my lips, it's going to be to that person or with my wife, because my wife is my counselor. She helps give me perspective. But I'm not going to go around talking about other people, what they're like, what their personality is like, what mistakes they've made, because that's of Satan. That is of Satan. But occasionally being offensive because I'm so focused on the idea and I can't even see these people, which makes it way more difficult for me. I don't even know what their expressions are. And
exactly. It does make
right?
it very difficult.
So we need to be patient on these study groups. It shouldn't be this sort of free-for-all. Colin and I were having a good discussion that time, I thought. And I was very surprised that Huey, wanted it to stop, because I was helping Colin in his presentation. I wasn't hindering his presentation. And now, sure, some people thought it was wrong. Well, just be patient. Allow a person to just sometimes do what they do as a person, and not jump on them because they're who they are. Right? So, I mean, that's all I'm asking of people. And I don't think that's much to ask, because everybody demands it of me, right? Don't they?
Yeah,
So,
well, people expect it of each other, but I just want to ask a couple of questions, Colin. Like, so you said something that, other people just take it for granted, like they come by it naturally.
mhm,
I know many people that have had to work on caring about the person that they're talking to. And I'm not talking about like a supervisor talking to an employee. I'm talking about, peers, people in the same class, like in college or whatever,
yeah,
people in the same, like there's many people, and you know that I've worked with children for
mhm,
25 years
mhm,
and adults as well with Asperger's. And this is a very common difficulty that many people have. We're all on the spectrum somewhere. And so I just wanted to clarify to let you know, it doesn't come naturally to most people. Most people have to really work at it.
okay.
Most people have to really work at
Right,
it. Okay.
that's
The other
why
question I wanted.
I don't get offended by people, because I accept people as they
Okay.
are. So I never
Right.
expect from something from somebody that they're not able to give. Right? That's the way I was raised. Everybody's valuable. Everybody's important. Doesn't matter their social standing, their intellect, you know, any of those types of things. None of those things matter. The person is valuable in and of themselves. And that's how I treat people. I learn
Okay.
from all kinds of people. I value Colin. I value Adelia. I value Huey. I value you. I value Rosanna. Right? Everyone, and Angela and Chris and on the iPhone, I value them too. Right? I value every single one of the people that I interact with, whether it's a customer coming into the store, whether it's a guitar student. I value
Mhm.
every single person. I care
Okay, but
about everyone
yeah,
very, very deeply. But it doesn't mean
okay.
that I'm going to know that something's going to offend them. And if they're offended, instead of broadcasting that, they need to come to me. Now, I realize that some people aren't going to do that, but it doesn't make me hate them. It doesn't make me think that they're bad people. They're just human beings, right? And that's all we have to recognize, is that we're all human beings. We all have blind spots. We all have things that we can't understand. And see, I was sympathetic with when Stephen had done a presentation on chronology, and I made some sympathetic statements. In my mind, they were sympathetic. That, I'm even having trouble understanding what Stephen is saying. Like, I can't remember everything. He went through it really quickly. And I can imagine that it's difficult for others. But I encouraged people to continue to study, and that you don't have to remember all of these dates. They're not the most important thing if you can see the general idea that these witnesses exist, right? Well, people after that, when I got off, they began to mock me as if I thought myself better than other people. Oh, if I'm offended, right? Now, why were people mocking me? That doesn't really make much sense to me. Because one is, I wasn't saying anything like that. I wasn't putting myself above other people. Other than the fact that I've studied all this chronology and I realize it's difficult, and I understand numbers. But people saw fit to mock me, and people felt justified in mocking me. That is, they really thought that I think of myself as high and mighty. Now, those people don't come to me and talk to me. They're the ones who are losing in the end, right? Now, some of those people hardly even know me, right? They've never taken time to get to know me, even if they had that opportunity. But many of them are never going to know me. But some of those people who mocked me know me. And other people who didn't know me would see this mocking, and they would get this same impression that Theodore thinks he's better than other people. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I never think of myself as better than anyone else. That would be crazy. We're all human beings. We all have faults. And we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And I have learned some amazing things from some of the simplest, unassuming people that other people have rejected. And I've learned great lessons from those people. And I believe that's true with everyone. Every one of us is important. Every one of us has value. This movement is not about who's saying what or who's doing what. God is leading a people to do a work. And in order for us to do that work, we have to come together in the upper room and confess our sins one to another, not like, Parminder and Tess, where we have hurt somebody, we come to them personally. Where we are hurt by someone, we say, you offended me, brother. You offended me, sister. And come to an understanding that just because somebody offended you doesn't mean that that person is not valuable. And it doesn't mean that that person is careless, or unloving or unkind. It just means that that person is different than you. And some people are more different than others, but that's just the way humanity is. And that's where I think that this movement is going. That's what I saw from the upper room study that Odilio presented, is he was really illustrating something that he didn't realize what he was illustrating was where this movement has been heading, is we're heading to that upper room. And all of these symbols that Odilio has found in the numbers and dates, all of these lines that Stephen has found, all of the insight that Dwight has gleaned from studying the Bible, all of the things that Colin has been given in regard to this structure, these things are all important, just as each individual is important. And if we try to say that somebody is doing something wrong, that there's something wrong with them, then we're denying God. Because God, in spite of the fact I wish I was never a part of anything that had to do with people, God keeps putting me in connection with people. And I have to endure it. But I believe that God has a purpose in it. What's that?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you've come to that conclusion, because we are to love each other,
Yeah.
really love each other
Right.
in a self-sacrificing way,
Yeah.
to efface ourselves.
Mhm.
We should be effacing ourselves before we even talk to another person.
Mhm.
Try to think of some kind word, an positive emotional word to preface every statement
Okay. Well, I
with.
can't do
In
emotion.
speaking to somebody, say brother or sister, I love you, and I have a different opinion. Can I tell you it? We have to practice these ways of being loving, not just assigning value. And I know what you mean by that. Every person does have value. You're right.
Yeah.
And everything you said, I thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate
And
everything that you've done here. Now, the reality, though, is that most people who know me consider me to be very loving, which might be surprising to people in this group. But people who actually know me, they interact with me all the time. Students, customers, relatives, some of my close friends, they consider me to be one of the most loving people. My oldest brother, John, he was jealous of my character as a child. And so he used to give me gifts at Christmas that he knew I would hate, because he wanted to see me be disappointed. And he confessed this to Heidi a few years ago. But he would never tell me that. He said, there's no way I can tell Theodore that I did that. You're going to have to tell him. Because if I told him, I would just start bawling. But this is the way that I was perceived growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up, I was the one that all of the neighborhood went to. I organized all of the events because I was the caring big brother in the neighborhood. But yet, when it comes to Adventism and this movement, there's a lot of people who hate me and don't understand that I'm loving because I maybe speak a different language than them or whatever. But this is about, as you're saying, we have to be able to care for one another. And the question is, how are we going to do that? I can only do
Yeah.
what God's given me to do. I can't do, I can't do politics. Like in a church, if I wanted to be accepted in a church, I could do the thing where, when you greet people and you shake their hand and you talk to them and you make, you do all these social niceties that make people feel like they're cared for. I cannot do that. You may
No, because you've said that you're afraid of people, and
Oh.
fear casts out love.
Well, yeah, fearful in the sense of doing something wrong that's going to hurt them. Not scared that they're going to hurt me. I'm scared I'm going to hurt
No,
them. That I'm going to
I
say the
know.
wrong thing, right?
Anxiety.
And
Anxiety.
yeah, right. And that's because when I do the things you're talking about, I do say the wrong thing. I actually have had those people more offended by me being nice to them than by ignoring them. And I can give you lots of examples of where I've reached out to people, I've said really nice things to them, and I tried to do what you're talking about, but I don't have that skill. Those people ended up hating me even more. So I don't know why
Well,
that is.
don't take my context wrong. I was referring to when you're sharing information. And it just goes back to what I said. People care more. They don't care what you know unless they know you care. So I was just
Okay,
applying.
but if I tell people I care, how are they going to know that I care?
Well, especially on Zoom, it's difficult because you can't smile at them and establish eye contact and
Right.
be calm. You actually have to use your words and your the volume of your voice, the pace of your speech. These are concrete things that people can be aware of and practice doing to show that they're in a calm spirit, they're not agitated, and they're not going to be accusatory, right? Even if you're saying something controversial, you can say, I don't want to be controversial, but I do have a comment. Like I really respect other people's
Okay.
opinions, but I have a different opinion I'd like to express.
Yeah, and when I've done
Would
that,
that be okay?
what's happened when I've done that? I've done that very thing that you're talking about. And I
Well,
shut
I
down.
don't.
I don't know if you were
Okay,
there or not, but I've done that. And
no, I have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I was just privy to that one episode where Huey basically spoke up.
Yeah.
Colin shut down, and I spoke to you later after the recording was over.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, yeah, like it was just what I've said before. It was, I think we all need to be aware of, are we interrupting? Are we raising our voice and talking fast? Those kinds of things.
Okay. Yeah, I listened
Yeah,
to it again after you because you recommend I listen to it. When I listened to it, I didn't see what it was that could have caused Huey's reaction. Now
well,
afterwards,
mhm.
People kept saying, yes, theater needs to stop. And I was saying, look, I don't want to be in this situation because I want to be a part of the study just like everyone else. And I don't want to have it happen when I start to discuss something with somebody that I think I'm doing in a fair way. Wasn't attacking him or anything. That's the only time my voice got raised from what I can, and I've watched the video a few times. So I thought
Okay.
Colin and I were just having a fine discussion. I didn't think that Colin had shut down, but maybe he had, and I hadn't recognized it at that point. But in anything that I was doing, I didn't expect to have Huey say, stop talking. right? I just didn't expect that. And I would say, well, why? Because I want to know the answer to this question. It's pretty simple. It's not difficult, right?
Mhm.
Right. So I realize that I have to work at this. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think it's a fair assessment to say somehow that I'm not working at it, or that I'm careless about it, or that I'm not trying to do something about it. It's just that,
I'm really glad to hear that. I
yeah,
like that. I hear that a lot I receive that in my heart more than, you know, trying to justify or make excuses or expect other people to make all the accommodations.
well, I think all of us have to make accommodations. And I don't think anything I've done is an excuse. I know people throw those types of words around, and I don't think that they're actually fair. When somebody says you're in denial, or you're being defensive, or you're making an excuse, that's actually not being very helpful. Um, I never say that to other people, because I know, one is, it shuts down communication. They're actually non-communication words to use. You're never going to help anybody by saying you're in denial, because the person says, well, I'm not in denial. Well, proof that you are in denial by the very fact you're saying you're not in denial, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so those types of things, and I've analyzed this over the years, of the types of things that people say that really aren't biblical. The Bible doesn't say it's wrong to be defensive when you're being attacked, or when you feel you're being attacked, right? Nothing wrong with being defensive. There's nothing wrong with explaining why you did something. That's not making an excuse. And just because you don't agree with someone does not mean you're in denial. Because I know myself way better than anyone else, and I know the problems that I have, the faults that I have. And those things I work on all the time, constantly in prayer, especially when I go on where I know people aren't going to receive what I have to say. You know how many times I
See, it's
never
very
say
powerful.
what?
Very, it's very powerful to hear you saying that you are being, taking responsibility,
Mhm,
looking for responsibility for what your part was in these
mhm.
things.
I
That's
always
very,
do.
very powerful
Well,
thing to be
I'm the only person
saying.
I have control over. So I don't, I mean, I understand what other people I think they need to do for themselves, but I'm not asking them to do it for me. That is, nobody's hurting my feelings, right? My feelings aren't being hurt by people saying the things they do, right? That's not really an issue for me. But they are hurting themselves when they don't talk to me, when they've been hurt by something I've done, and they refuse to talk to me, that they talk to others. They're not only hurting themselves, they're hurting the other people around them. And you will never hear me tearing down other people. And this is something I learned years. I mean, I learned this from my mom when I was a child. I mean, I already understood
Right.
how how people are affected, and what it is, how we need to accept others as they are. Because my mom accepted me as I was. And that acceptance I try to give to others. So I think it's an extremely important point. But we one of the things that has offended people is that I've said that this movement is divided. And we know that it is. But some people have took offense to that very statement. And the way that they imagine it is that I want to have everybody following me. And and of course that's the farthest thing from the truth. I'm actually,
But,
I'd rather have
but you
nothing.
have to allow people to have their own perceptions, right?
Yeah, but I do.
They have their perception for a reason.
Yeah, but people are going to
Yeah,
be
I mean,
offended, or they're going to imagine evil. There's nothing I can do about them imagining evil. But we have to be careful that we don't imagine evil about our brother just because they differ from us in how they communicate and how they think and in some of their views.
Can I say something?
Yep, I appreciate it, Rosanna.
I think when people are presenting,
Hmm.
we should be listening very carefully, because if it's coming from the Lord, we don't want to abuse it.
Yeah, and yes, and so like sometimes what I'll do is if I have a question, I'll write it down so that I can still follow along with what the person is saying, but not forget the question that I had.
Yeah. Well, the reason I became a Seventh-day Adventist is I went to a Seventh-day Adventist church, and I went for the Sabbath school. I knew that their church started in the morning, so I went there, and there was a Sabbath school discussion going on, and it was really interesting because I'd been in lots of churches, and I'd never seen such a discussion in my life of people interacting and having real opinions that differed from others. And yet, those people were friends. After church, I saw them talking together, enjoying each other's company. And I said, this is the church I need to join. And this is why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, is because we can discuss things and nobody has to be, say the right pat answers, right? You can have an opinion. In Warburg Church, we can have some very good discussions where people differ, but nobody's attacking the other person for having an opinion. In our church, people can talk during the sermon. They can stand up and rebuke a speaker or a pastor. It's been done many times in Warburg Church. And nobody's offended because it's about the truth. When I'm in a study, if for me to be a part of a study, I need to be able to interact. If there's something that's important to me to understand. And now, so I disagree with the idea that we should just listen to presentations. I don't like it when people just listen to a presentation that I'm doing. I want people to interact with me. I want them to ask hard questions. I want them to challenge me, like Bonnie has been doing this whole evening. I want that, because there's no way that we're going to communicate if people are just listening to what I'm saying. And so I know we all have these differences about what we expect, but for me, Colin's my friend, and when he's giving a study, I expect that he's going to answer some questions that I'm going to ask, and that those questions aren't just for me. I know that when I ask a question, that somebody else has the same question. And that's why I tell people to ask questions, because you may ask a question and you think, well, I don't really need the answer to this, or want to bother the person. But somebody else may be having that same question. And the study can go in a completely different direction. And that can be led by God. So I don't agree with this idea. I mean, I understand and I appreciate that you have this view about presentations, but it's not my view. And it's not something I ever want to be a part of having just to listen to presentations and not being able to interact. And so, I've watched these studies, not every study. Lately, I haven't been watching them because I'm basically worn out, and I'm also doing studies with other people. But it's how many times I haven't said anything that people, of course, never take into account. How many times I didn't respond, that I didn't make a comment, and how hard that is for me to do. And that people, when I look at how many times I've actually interacted with the group and how many minutes I've actually talked in these studies, I would say over the last 2 years, you probably couldn't put 30 minutes of me talking together. Unless I'm doing the study. Right? So this perception that somehow I'm interrupting studies all the time, I'm not. But when something's important, a point is being made, or points not being made that should be made, sometimes somebody has to speak out, and I hate that it has to be me. I would rather somebody else, when I'm in a Sabbath school class, and I'm sitting there as a student, I would rather somebody else say what needs to be said than me saying it, and I'll often wait. And I rejoice when somebody else says that thing that I was going to say, because then I didn't have to say it. Things shouldn't always come from me. That's one of the things I hate about presenting. It's because I have to talk all the time. And then everybody's going to think, well, Theodore just likes to hear his own voice because he's talking. But the reality is, I rarely talk in these types of situations. But when I do, people seem to get upset, and I understand a little bit why. But I'm often talking at a time when it's actually something's going on that needs to be addressed, and I try to address it in the nicest way I can. But that's not always taken that way. So anyway, I need to go because it's late.
Yeah.
But,
One thing I want to mention
what's that?
on your chart there you had before this one
Yeah,
on the 265s,
yeah,
you had 2 dates inside.
yeah.
Did you notice that they were both a doubling?
The 11/22.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 12/24. No, I didn't.
Yes.
Thanks for noticing that.
The other thing I wanted to point out too, thanks Rosanna for that, and I'll make it really quick, is 1989. After that, 2 years later was when the flag went down and all that in Moscow, right? In 1991. And when you look at
777 days later.
Yeah, when you look at 2020, no, where was it? There's somewhere on this chart that it's 2 years apart. Same.
Yeah, well, 2021 to 2023. Yeah. But it's not 777 days, it's 780 days. I mean, if we're going to go there, it could be a little bit longer. But we already know that 780 and 777 are related to each other because of the 3 days, right? So there's 3 more days from 777 to get 780. So this was pointed out by Odilio in his study on the mandates.
I think it was a different chart because there was a 2-year period. But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to, I noticed that. You probably have too. But
Well, we
I
got
think it was a different.
2021 here and 2023 here, so that's 2 years. January.
They were closer together. It was a chart where they were closer together, I think.
Okay. Well,
and I think it had 1989 on it. It was the chart that had 1989 on it, I think.
Okay, well, let's close.
Anyways. Okay.
Dear Father in heaven, we are so very thankful for you making each of us the particular way that you have. You've given us gifts. You've given us weaknesses that we need one another to help us with. And we've given strengths that others can be blessed by. You've given us your spirit, your love, so that we can truly love one another, and that we know love covers a multitude of sins. Help us, Lord, to truly love those that we find difficult to love. We ask, Lord, that you can be with us on the Sabbath. We thank you for the discussion. And we know, Lord, that there's many things that we think and feel, things that we say, that need to be corrected. We ask, Lord, that through your Spirit and through our contact with others, that we will be transformed in character. We pray that we can come together in the upper room, even though we can't be physically together, and that your Spirit can be poured out upon this movement, and that we can truly work in a united fashion. We know, Lord, that we need you living in our hearts by faith. And we're thankful for all the people who you've given light to. I'm thankful for Rosanna noticing a detail that I never noticed. And we know, Lord, that even though we differ, you can use every one of us to your glory. We pray for the meetings this Sabbath, and we pray for all of our contacts with others, and we ask that you can teach us, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
And happy Sabbath, everyone.